there's a lot of different facets to look at. So my question to you again is, where can we save money? Where can we cut out? If I said find 5% of your budget, or I will, where would you find it?
Well, I will say that when I go through my budget, I look at the needs, I look at what's the required minimum amount. So like with furniture, I cut that out. I try to limit with computers, that's kind of our lifeline. So I try to make those spread out so they're not all in one year, and make sure that my staff has what they need to do the job, but that we create efficiencies so that we're not spending 10 hours of staff time for something that really should spend an hour. And that we're working with departments to create those efficiencies, with processes, with software that will streamline everything and make it easier for us to do our job and make it responsible government. I mean, that's really what we're looking at. I will say that, like, we did cut our budget. We looked at the software, and we had a lot of one-time costs in there, so that is reduced. We had some one-time furniture costs that were reduced as well. So our costs are going down in finance because we're finding those efficiencies. And we have an established team, so it saves us money when we have an established team. The minute that we have turnover, that costs us money. And so, and finance had a lot of turnover last year. More than half of our team is less than 1 year with the city. So that turnover costs the city. So.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So it looks like reading this, Raylan, again, we'll get better as we go over the first one, of course. But it looks like, am I reading this right, that your budget's only going up $841?
That is correct.
If you look at the far right, Councilor Williams, she's cut some things out of there as well.
I still am not tracking with you,
Yeah,
Mr.
I'm
Doty.
gonna stand up. That, if you look across the bottom,
Right?
they're only asking in total for an $841 increase. However, I'm still.
And if you needed me to just cut the 841 and make it a neutral budget,
Well, I think,
I could definitely look at things to do
I
that.
think we already are by, depending on what the rest of the counselors think about not adding the new halftime position. So,
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What is
Mhm.
what is the cost of that new position you're wanting to add?
So the total cost if that position was employed for the entire year, with benefits, lost my page, would be $23,583. And that's if they work the full 19 hours for the full 52 weeks.
and
And
Mr., go ahead,
so,
sorry.
yeah, just to kind of touch on with those positions as well, because we did talk about that, because I know that there were some counselors that did voice some concerns on that. In sitting down with Raylan and others, we feel that positions that are being proposed are warranted and are necessary. As the city continues to grow, obviously that need for new positions is going to continue. We don't want to grow government beyond its reach, but we also want to keep up. That's why we had to hire 30, 40, 50 people, because the city hadn't done that for several years, and so we had to catch up on that. So we don't want to get ourselves in a position of having to do that again. So it's a small bite at the apple each year, rather than a big, huge bite every couple of years. And again, realizing, respecting that we knew that there was council members that had said that they did not want that, but the hope was that there was other council members that maybe did on that, and so that's why you see those coming forward. It's not out of a lack of respect, knowing of what some council members had voiced, just that we felt that it was still necessary, and the hope that there was other council members maybe that had support for that, and kind of see, and again, that's what these discussions are for. This is why this is a workshop. It's not a final decision by any means, but just want to make sure that's clear. That's the reason why, that you see those out there working with Raylan and the rest of the city. Because they did, as you can see, there was positions that were cut. After some of those discussions, kind of, okay, what's the bare bones that we feel we really need to continue to move forward and where we're at, and having the necessary, making sure that the grass gets cut at the park and there's streets getting repaired, and all those things take positions. And so to make sure we keep up on that, so that there aren't excessive complaints coming in to all of you. I know you get a lot of those. We obviously need people to cut the grass, to water the grass, to fix the streets, to do all those different things, and so that's why you do see those positions. And ultimately, it is up to the council, but that's why it is presented, again, not out of any lack of respect for anybody's opinions or thoughts that they voiced, just so that we can have that discussion and see where is, you know, the majority of the council on those issues. So just want to make sure that was out there on that, so. Councilor Doty?
Oh, Mr. Mayor, my original question, I figured it out on my own, but, yeah, I absolutely respect that. I think each counselor needs to be asked, and if
Mhm.
council says it's warranted, but I think that probably is our biggest, I mean, there's several things we can ask about, but certainly on this one, that is the biggest sticking point, and we need to know which way the other counselors wanna go.
Yes,
A
Councilor
couple
Oliver.
questions. Remind me, Ray Lynn, please, between 23 and 24, finance, salaries in finance went up 293,000 and change. What was the cause of that increase?
So we ended up adding 2 positions. So that would be the class and comp budget analyst position, and then we added the purchasing specialist position. In addition to that, was it in 23 that we split, the finance director to a finance director and city treasurer? And so those 2 that kind of added to the budget as well.
Okay. And then second question, unrelated. You're talking about P cards, which I'm somewhat familiar with, but it kind of sounds like a done deal. I don't remember that coming to council with a policy or a plan. How is that coming into effect? Because I haven't seen anything yet.
So at last city council, we had the RFP that we went out to RFP, and that was on last city council on Tuesday, that you guys approved the approval of the RFP and the contract, and essentially it doesn't cost the city anything, we actually get a rebate back for spending money on P cards. But essentially a P card allows us to issue travel cards and specific cards to employees. Right now, just department, like appointed officials have P cards. So we have very limited. And then with the P cards, we can actually hold, we can do specific merchant codes, so we can go spending essentially. So there's only certain places people can purchase items. We can limit where they purchase, how much they purchase, so we can set limits of $100, $50, up to $1,000. It brings accountability on each employee when they're spending, so, instead of one person reconciling a P card and, having to track down all those receipts, each employee will have to reconcile their P card, and it's through US Bank, it's an expense system.
Okay, I wasn't here last council meeting, I missed that, so I'm just getting up to speed. Will there be a policy at some point that we'll see?
Yes, it will come out with a policy before we issue any P cards.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Raylene or Rochelle?
Mr.
Yes,
Mayor.
Councilor Stoddard?
I still have, a question on the professional services. Could you give me a background on that one?
So with CDBG, we have to do a 5-year plan, and with that 5-year plan, you have to go out and collect a lot of data. It's not just the annual action plan, which is allowable for one person to really collect. It's a lot of data. It's very data heavy. And so with the reduction in our 20% allocation, with CDBG funds being reduced down for the last 3 years, just because the federal government has cut the annual funding, it limits what we can spend on a consultant through our admin and CDBG. So that $20,000 is for us to match what CDBG has for an RFP to bring in a consultant to help with the 5-year plan that Dominique will assist with as well.
So bottom line, it's a policy that they've set up that we have to adhere to, right?
That is correct.
Okay, got it, thank you.
And we've always paid for these professional services. They're not new. It's just we don't have enough funding this year to pay for all of it.
Okay. And, excuse me, again, the travel and meetings, that's, kind of give me an overview again of that.
So with the travel and meeting, we send our staff to certain Springbrook trainings, which is our ERP system. On top of that, with our purchaser and then grant federal training that we have to do so that we can keep up with current changes that are happening. So that's added to it. On top of this, there is one-time, travel and meeting, for Rochelle and I to look at getting the Certified Professional Finance Officer through GFOA. It's just, it's a 2-year program to get into, so.
Okay. Again, that's stuff that we have to do to keep our systems going, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on, again, this is just, for the overview of the budget proposal.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Before we move on, could we get maybe some, opinions on whether or not the halftime position, because that's gonna keep coming up?
It is, and I know the employee overview, I think, is next up to go over all of that, but we can do it individually as well. Is that correct?
We can do it however you would
However
prefer.
the council would prefer, so.
Do it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So we can, like,
I prefer to do it
talk about each of them.
as they pop up
Yeah,
instead
yep.
of trying
So,
to
yeah.
remember
Yeah, go right ahead.
at the end. Well, I think, Counselor Williams and I have already given our opinions, so
So,
I guess we're
in
looking
that
for-
case, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a point for the rest of the council, and if you'll indulge me for a moment, I want to play a recording for you. It'll be brief, and then I'll give you an explanation.
Police, fire, or paramedics? Probably a good police. What's going on there? I'm not good in my head. Okay. Are you having thoughts of harming yourself? Yes. What's your name? Jessica. Hey, Jessica, I'm going to send help to you, okay? Have you tried to harm yourself? No. No? Do you have any weapons on you? I'm sorry, Jessica, what was that? No. No, okay.
It's a longer recording than that. That's all they got out of this 911 call. This was just about 3 weeks prior to Tobin Bolter's death. This 911 call, all the information that police had when they went to this call was what you just heard. At what time she said she had no weapons. When the police arrived on the scene, they found that she had rolled a couch up against the window and had a loaded firearm and was intending on opening fire on the police that showed up. She recanted at the last minute and walked out and confessed all that to the police officers. I'm glad we didn't have a Tobin Bolter moment here, but my fear is that unless we're willing to bolster public safety, fire and police with more employees, we're going to have it sooner than later. And by adding other positions in the city, we're taking away from what we could add to public safety. In addition to that, we have the problem of employees losing opportunities because they don't have enough staff. They're taking, I want to say, an average of 40 to 50 calls a week lately on day shift with around 5 employees, and many of those calls are 2-officer calls. And then in addition to that, I've heard from several of them that burnout is an ongoing concern, that they can't take time off like they want to because they're already at minimums. Admittedly, we're making a lot of progress. Chief, I didn't tell you I was going to dig into all this right now, but this is my opinion as a city councilman and my conviction that we need to add police officers and fire, and every other position we add to the city takes away potential for us adding more to what is my number one concern, and that is public safety.
Any other discussion or comments? Yes, Councilor Dittenber.
Mr. Mayor, I think, and other members of the council, I think first and foremost, our obligation to our community is that we provide an effective and efficient form of government. And, having a tremendous amount of support for our first responders and for our law enforcement. I don't think it's necessarily we fund police and fire or we fund somebody else because we need payroll to pay police and fire. We need people in accounting to help police and fire. And I hope that we can compartmentalize each of these individual requests and ask the question, does finance need another employee? And knowing that they're there all week. And I would suspect, and I'm just guessing, that you didn't bring something frivolous to us. You didn't bring anything that is not necessary. So anyway, I just hope that we can, I'm not advocating for this employee. I'm just thinking collectively, in totality, we need to provide for an effective form of government. And if we're looking at missing $1.6 million in impact fees, maybe it's worth a half-time employee. If we're talking about, you know, a $500,000 accounting error, maybe again that's worth, or maybe it's $1 million black eye to the city because we've misused a P card. Maybe that's worth a $23,000 employee. So anyway, I don't think it's if we give to this organization, police and fire are going to suffer. I'll definitely consider that, but that's just kind of my opinion.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor.
I would concur with Councilman Dittenberg on that because our systems have to work, and having some experience in my previous tenure with the city council, by far, this finance administration has done more for us here in the last year or so than I've been acquainted with for the last 4 years when I first served on the council. And we finally have transparency in our finance department, and I really feel that the $841, while I understand what Councilman Williams is saying, but I'm just overlooking the rest of the stuff. There's more ways that we can cut in bigger numbers than this, and I would really hope that everybody supports the $841. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other discussion?
Well, I guess I'm the
Councilor, all
last one
good?
to weigh in, so I might as well. And I, at this point, I'm not going to take a stance that says I'm not approving any other positions. I want to hear piece by piece and see where we're at. By all means, I support the police department and the fire department, but I would not approve any positions for either of those if they were administrative level. The only way I'd approve positions for those is if they're answering calls. That's where we need our people, and that's the service the public sees, and that's what's my priority, so.
Okay, very good. Well, I think that does help give some direction, so we'll kind of look at that, and we appreciate everybody's opinions and statements on that, so it
Can I
does help
add
a
one
lot.
more
Yes, please,
thing?
go right ahead.
Okay. I would like to point out that we have approximately 300 to 350 employees within the city. Out of that 350, I would say approximately 130 or more, maybe 140 now, are for police and fire. And the basic services of government, finance, clerk, HR, IT, are there to support the entire city, but a huge portion of what those departments do are to support police and fire because they are two of the biggest general fund divisions within that. And so in this P card, for example, that we plan to implement, on the request from police, there were at least 10 P cards, 10 to 15 for police out of the 50 that are being required for the organization. I don't know how many fire had, but I think it was another 5 to 10 for fire. And so almost half the P cards issued citywide are going to be going to public safety. And the more we can monitor spending and make sure that we are making sure that we're doing our due diligence and getting the best price for things, not overspending where we don't need to overspend, and can have a little bit more oversight on that, which is what this P-CAR system will allow us to do, we will see cost savings, not only in police and fire, but in the other departments as well, and that will hopefully free up funding for future positions. I think that to only allow for positions in police and fire is maybe a solid argument, but it's not a long-term solution, because you need those services to support city public safety, fire, and police as well. So I just wanted to make that note for you guys as well.
Mr.
I
Mayor?
appreciate it, yes.
And just for the record, I'm all for the P card.
All for pizza?
P card, P card.
Very good. Anything else for Lynn or Rochelle
Not for finance.
for
no.
that part? Okay, anything else from any of the council members? Okay, very good. Appreciate that. So speaking of pizza, and it's up to the council if you want to take a little, I know we just kind of got started, but we do have pizzas here, to make sure you have enough energy to get through the evening, depending on how long we go. So if you want to take kind of a break right now, get some food, get some pizza, and then we'll kind of go back at it, so.
I was just gonna ask, how long is this meeting scheduled for? Is
It's
there a
scheduled
plan?
till 8, so the hope is that we can get through it before then. I think we will, but obviously it depends on all the discussion, things like that, but that's what it is scheduled for.
Thank you.
So don't feel like you have to take all that time, just,
Yeah.
Okay.
I got caught up in the,
I think everybody got their pizza,
Prepare
and feel
one.
free, like I said, this is a workshop, so if you
Hey, grab
do
one that's,
get the
big.
urge to get another slice, it's back there, so feel free to get up at any time and go back. We won't get offended, so. Okay, so we are going to, we just did finance, and so, did you do any of the overview of the budget? Are we gonna
I
jump to that?
haven't yet.
Okay,
We
so we're
had to
gonna
do
jump
finance
into,
first, so.
and sorry to take you away from eating your
That's
pizza.
okay.
So, overview of the budget proposal. So we have Raylene.
So,
And
Laura, do you want to bring up the PowerPoint? So first of all, kind of to talk about your handbooks, I'm not going to go through this, but there is a 2024 Community Profile and Demographics Report. Matt Oram, my budget and compensation analyst, created this report. And I think it just tells the story of Caldwell for the last year and how we're growing. So, this is just something for you guys to have, just some data, something new that we're trying. So if you like it, please let me know. If you don't like it, let me know too. The clicker. Okay, so this is kind of what I'm going to go over. So first, the legislative budget book. I'm going to talk about some revenue, the employee requests and COLA, employee benefits, and the City Hall capital budget specifically, because nobody else really talks about those, and then any questions that you guys have. And feel free to interrupt me in the middle too. So the 2025 legislative book. One thing I want to say with this is that this is a work in progress. So what you have is a point in time. It's not balanced. It's a point in time because I'm still waiting for, I use estimates on data that I'm still waiting for. Property tax I haven't received on, so it's an estimate from the county. And the fees are not quite resolved yet. So the revenue and expenditures could change on this. Now to get updated reports, because I'm not going to print this book again for you guys, I will have all of these reports on the city website under finance that you guys will be able to see, kind of like the budget book, except not as detailed. It'll just have the reports on there, exactly what you see here. So within this budget book, there's quite a few. We've already gone into the reports. If revenue is associated with a budget or a fund, you'll see both an expense and a revenue, and then a balance at the end, which shows a total of, and if we're using fund balance or not fund balance, or so you'll see that. But the first tab I wanted to bring you to was the 5-year plan or the 5-year outlook, and I put this together. And it goes through, it has 23 actuals, 24 budget, 25 as the request. And then I kind of projected out 26, 27, 28, and 29 fiscal years. And so the first page you're going to see is all of the tax-supported funds. We don't really look at property tax, sales tax, franchise fees, all of those as a whole. So this is all of it's general fund, and it's any, I just lost my train of thought, sorry, any fund that receives property tax or sales tax. So that includes the street fund, the airport fund, the library fund, Parks and Rec, and then any transfers that get transferred to the general fund, so economic development. And then even though they're not, they don't receive tax, like property tax, I do include the capital funds here and the impact fee funds to show kind of, because we include those in our general fund on the financial statements. So this is kind of a look at overall revenues that are shared, dedicated revenues, and then it's a very high level of expenditures, just personnel, maintenance and operation, capital, and transfers. So, and then when we do have the general, the GO bond, it'll have the debt as well. So, as you go through, so the 5-year plan on the tax support plan or the tax support fund is very high level, and it kind of predicts how much use of fund balance we're using. It doesn't really have a cash balance on there because it's so many different fund balances and we can't mix those. But as you go along and say, you look at general fund, you're gonna see the revenues from general fund and any department that was in general fund, and then you're gonna see the specific expenditures by department. And then, you'll see the use of fund balance, and then I have also set aside, that 30% in reserves at the bottom of that. So that's kind of on the second page on the back. You'll see kind of a cash balance and then the 30% reserve underneath that and kind of the trend we're looking at. So this tells you specifically how we are not balanced within this budget yet. Still a work in progress. I have broken out some departments, so there's police, and fire as well, so you can kind of see them. And then some of the specific fee departments, so building, planning, zoning, and fire prevention, and working with them on their fees. And then it starts to get very high level with each of the funds. So if you have any questions on those, feel free to ask me, but those are just very high level, looking at the trends, looking at growth, and it's slow growth, so everything is predicted at 3% or less. And looking at that, or even a flat growth, so.
So I do have a question before we move on, really. Looking at the tax-supported funds here, on the back of the page, this year's got a negative 34 million. Can you tell me what I'm looking at there?
The negative 21,000, is that the one you're looking at, or is you, or?
At the very bottom on the back of the page, it says projected surplus or deficit,
Yes.
and I'm looking at a $34 million number there.
Oh, that is for fiscal year 24. So we did plan in fiscal year 24 to use significant fund balance. We had all of the general fund fund balances that we did, which acuted to almost $14 million of that. But then you look at the street fund had planned use of fund balance, Parks and Rec had planned use of fund balance, capital fund had planned use of fund balance. There's quite a few funds that had planned use of fund balance.
So even though it's a deficit, it's accounted for?
It is, so.
Perfect, thank you.
So Ray Lynn, I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it okay for me to ask a question now?
Yeah,
or
just
should-
jump right on it.
So this may or may not be relevant, but it is to me, so I guess that's what I'll.
And it is.
So I think that, if I'm not mistaken, isn't the county going through something where they, over the last couple of years, used their fund balance to meet their demands of their budget? And now that they've expended a great proportion of their fund balance, they're looking at adjusting taxes. This projection here is without a significant tax increase, correct?
So the only tax increase that I budgeted for in this is obviously what we did in 24. And then right now, I'm planning for 25 to, I do have it built in here to take the 3% and the new construction and annexation. By no means do we have to do that. I just have that projected. So that is all up to your guys' decision. I will say, when we talk about revenue, I'll explain why there might be a need to, but when we talk about revenue, I'll get to that. But plan use of fund balance, I mean, the plan is to never get below and dip into our reserves of that 30%.
So a fund balance is different than a reserve.
They're kind of held in the same, so when I talk about fund balance, it's in the same, but, we never want to get below the reserve of that 30%, so.
I have one more question, if you don't mind. And this is just a personal thing, and you probably have a really good explanation. I'm struggling with including urban renewal.
Including what, I'm sorry?
Urban renewal.
Oh, so this does not include urban renewal as the urban renewal agency. This is including urban renewal funds that the city receives as reimbursement from urban renewal.
Okay, yeah, I don't want the public to look at it and think we're putting urban renewal money in the city.
No.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna go through every page of the 5-year, but if you ever have any questions or wanna talk to me about that, feel free to reach out on email, or I can schedule a meeting with you guys, or we can talk at next budget workshop too. The way this is set up, there is a table of contents in the beginning, but I lumped all of the general fund, departments under general fund. And then, I did break out police and fire. Now, under police and fire, this also includes the impact fee fund and the capital fund for police and fire that are located underneath those specific tabs. Once you get to all the other tabs other than, you start to get just one, so library is just library, streets is just streets, airport's just airport. Parks and Rec includes, the impact fee for parks. And then federal funds includes both ARPA and CDBG funds. And, cemetery, I just included the cemetery fund. This does not currently have the report for the cemetery capital fund or cemetery perpetual fund, because we are not budgeting any expenditures out of those funds. We will just have the revenue, but it will be on the online report.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
So just a couple clarifying questions. So the budget you've submitted to us would include the 3% approving that. You've already added that into this budget, so if we weren't to approve that, all of this would have to be adjusted, correct?
It
So to
does
speak?
happen.
I understand, I'm just making it clear. And then for salaries, did you include a 4%, 3%, 2%,
I included a 4%.
4%, and then, okay.
I
just
have
wanted
the
to make sure
numbers
we
for
knew
all
what-
the different percentages so you can see the impact.
I saw that, that's why I asked which one you
Oh.
used, so that everybody knows. Thank
Yep.
you.
And then under Public Works Fund, it includes water, wastewater, sanitation, irrigation. So that is the legislative budget book. Like I said, this is a point in time, and, as we make adjustments, then, all of the reports will be online, and you will be able to see, the adjustments made in real time. So for revenue, under general fund, just that first page, you're gonna see all of the revenues for general fund. And this includes police and fire. It is all of the revenues. So you can kind of see that total. So I will say with property tax, like I said, I included the 3%. I got an estimate from the county for annexation and new construction, and they're estimating about a 3% increase from last year, which is very minimal. So, once I have finalized numbers, which is gonna be towards that last, workshop in June, once I have those finalized numbers, I will talk to you about the property tax, and we can make a decision on that. Sales tax. So sales tax is interesting. We get numbers from the state through AIC, which is Association of Idaho Counties, or Idaho Cities, sorry. And, last year, they projected an increase. And so that's what I budgeted for. And they came back with a revised projection. So in '24, we're gonna see about a 200,000 decrease, which is okay. I'm not worried about that, because the class and compensation study did not get implemented right away. So we do not have to, we're not gonna be short in revenues to cover expenditures. But then they also revised the sales tax for '25 as well, and it was lower than '24. So I've made that adjustment within this budget, so you're gonna see sales tax trending down. The '24s are still, because it's pulling budget from our, so we haven't revised the sales tax in the '24 budget, but that number has decreased down. And so the '25 number is much lower than what you see in the '24 budget.
So quick, I apologize, quick question on the sales tax.
Yeah.
Is the overall sales tax statewide going down, or is how they're divvying it up changing?
It's the overall sales tax statewide is going down, I think, just because people are spending more on necessities and not going out and buying extra stuff.
Okay.
So, We have the cost allocation plan. So we talked about this a little bit last year. The cost allocation plan is a formula that distributes 50% of the mayor's, IT, city clerk, finance, HR, all of those general fund departments that are not fee-based, 50% of their expenditures to all of the special revenue and enterprise funds. And so, you're gonna see this go up, and the reason you're gonna see it go up, this is all my bad, I'm gonna admit it, but I made a calculation error last year. So, I included police and fire, which we're not gonna ever charge police and fire, and so that's not gonna happen. And so that's why this year you see that number increased. However, that number, and I'd be happy to show you how that's broken down, is actually reduced for a lot of different departments, because instead of basing it on expenditures, we changed the formula, based it on revenues, so it's more accurate. It's based on actual revenues. So the smaller departments, I know there was a lot of talk last year about golf fund, library, and those overcharging, and those departments actually went down. In addition, we broke out facilities. So facilities was kind of included within that cost allocation plan. We broke that out so you can see each of those lines and what's getting charged. So that's why on that first page, it's the CAP facilities line. It's about $440,000. You'll see that as budgets adjust, this number will adjust up or down depending on how all of the other budgets adjust. We would go in and fix and adjust the budgets because we don't want to overcharge departments. For fees, we're working on fees. With general fund, I have a meeting next week with Brett and Rob and Robin, because currently with what's proposed, there's not enough revenue coming in to cover the current expenditures for those departments. And since those are all fee-based, we need to adjust fees. It's not going to be just an overall, let's address 5% increase. That's not what we want to do. We want to be strategic in how we adjust it, and only adjust it for what we need to meet the expected expenditures. So that is something you'll see in the updated live reports as we're working through that. The interest revenue, you're going to see the amount has gone up significantly because the rates have stayed steady, and so each year we're addressing. So in 23, you can see we received 1.3 million, and I was very conservative with my budget and budgeted 250,000. We've already received 3 times that for this year. So that's why that projection for 25 is still conservative in case rates do drop, but that's 750,000. And then for contracts, so I'm still working with both the fire chief for rural fire contract. I think the discussions there are going to be, you know, whether that contract goes up 3% or how that contract, because that's a significant part of fire's revenue. But with the growth plan, we really have to tread carefully with trying to plan that out. I've also worked with the Deputy Chief of Police for the SRO contracts, and you're going to see the amounts adjusted in there to reimburse the actual expenses for the SROs that we deploy to the schools. So that's general fund. For the special revenue and enterprise funds, the big one I want to talk about is the road and bridge tax in streets. So that specific one, what's interesting about that, I just talked to the county yesterday. We budgeted $554,000. I think that's $543,000 this last year, because we figured that Canyon Highway District 4 was going to levy that amount. They did not levy for that fund, so all we were receiving as past dues. We've only received about $38,000 of that revenue currently. And they did not levy for that fund. I'm working with Rob so we can have discussions on that. So that amount is, I don't know what it'll be for 24 or 25. I plugged in an amount, but I don't know if they will levy a certain amount or not levy. So, because I'm not in control of their budget, so. That's part of, probably why part of the property taxes did decrease so much is because that fund was not levied, so. With the enterprise funds, the big one that I want to talk about is water. You're gonna, when we go to do the fees, we're doing some data, but you're gonna see a significant increase in water. If we don't increase fees in water, there's not gonna be enough fund balance. This is something I identified last year, and we did increase fees a little bit, but not enough. So right now, it's to cover just the maintenance and operations and, just the growth of the city. So there are gonna be, when the fees come forward, these are required. If we don't pass them, then we will be taking drastic action within the water fund, so. The new position request. So there's quite a bit, but, Noah, will you bring up the position list? And I'll kind of explain that. This one. New position. Yep, that one. So with that request, so we started with quite a few positions in here. So anything that has a line through it, currently has been removed for the budget. Anything that does not have a line through it is not highlighted, is currently budgeted within the current budget that you see. When we get to police and fire, so part of general fund that occurred with police and fire and the difficulties there, so we have been paying 10% of police and fire pay out of ARPA. There's about $500,000 in police and about $400,000 in fire. So ARPA ends September 30th of this year for that project. And so general fund has to absorb that. We're not going to take that 10% away from people. So that is part of the balancing, is that it's hard to add new positions when we have to cover that 10% pay. And so I know I've been having a lot of discussions with both chiefs about the budget, trying to figure out the best options, and really trying to come up with a plan. We do not have a finalized plan right now. Please scroll down. But I know that there's needs. So you can see there's quite a few positions requested in both police and fire. So those are kind of where that is. Other departments, we did cut out positions. You can see I worked with Julie to budget Parks and Recs balance, and she originally had a city forester in there, and just with budgeting this year, just not having the ability. So we moved that to fiscal 26 to kind of set up a long-term plan. So obviously these are all going to be part of approval process for you guys. But one of the big things I wanted to talk about, so in funding, for example, in the wastewater fund, if you can choose whether or not to fund the positions, that's up to you guys, but that not funding those does not impact the general fund at all, because those are enterprise funds. So that's one of those things that not funding them does not impact adding police and fire. The engineering positions, the same thing. Even though they're in general fund, engineering is part of a different cost allocation plan where all of their revenue comes from all of the enterprise funds. And so if we cut them, it would not add more money to the general fund. Same with the building, they're fee-based, and so it would not add more money. So those are just kind of the discussions, kind of talk about the revenue source of some of these positions. And I'd be happy to to create a spreadsheet that talks about every single revenue source, if that's what you'd like me to do.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Can I ask a question now, or?
Yeah.
So Raylan, if I understood correctly, of the 23 positions on this list that you've given us, how many of those are requested to be paid for out of a, the wastewater or so how many of those would be paid for out of the general fund, and how many of them would be paid for, meaning, really, you can't swap one for the other? I mean,
Okay,
it's not
that
a one
makes
for
sense.
one, is that
Yeah.
correct?
So go ahead and scroll up, Noah. So if we start from the top, so the three positions, safety emergency manager, building and facilities director, those are both fee-based, and so those are paid from building and permit fees. And so they would not have any impact on the general fund. The custodians could potentially, because they're part of another cost allocation plan, but the general fund only pays $52,000. And that's for full facilities, so that's the cleaning of the Nancola Center and the 621. So if we were to cut those, we would still have some portion that we'd have to pay. The finance position, half of that, so half of that 23,000, so 10,000 would go back to general fund. Go down. The HR positions, half of those costs would go back to general fund. The library is out of the library fund. Half of the chief of staff position would go back to general fund. Same with the part-time communications, half of that position would go back to general fund. All of Parks and Rec positions, that one's kind of up in the air. The golf position would stay in golf, but the Parks and Rec, because they're property tax, there's the option to balance it. If those were cut, there's potential to reallocate property tax back to general fund. The building record specialist and plans examiner are fee-based. Engineering is fee-based. Streets, there's the potential same thing where it'd be a reduction in property tax and move to general fund. And then water is a separate fund, wastewater, the two wastewater ones are separate fund. And I'd be happy to update the spreadsheets and email it out so everybody has that too. So those are the positions. Any other questions before I move on?
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Councilor Olga?
So as Councilor Doty was speaking about earlier, you included a 4% increase, and that's what these numbers are based on.
Yes.
That's 4% across the board, flat, no variance, is that, or
That's
is there
correct.
something
It's-
else? Of that, okay.
Yeah, it's a COLA, yeah.
Any other
Mr. Mayor,
questions? Yeah, Councilor Stoddard?
Raylene, when you talk about fee-based positions, you know, that's actually a tax, though, on the taxpayers, right? Because they have to pay more for what the service they're getting, am I correct there?
So the fee base would be like a plumbing permit or a building permit or, a mechanical permit, so
Okay.
those are the fee base that I talk about.
Okay, so it has nothing to do with the taxpayer relative, it's those who buy new homes and that type of thing?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So just a point of clarification then, so a plans examiner might be a fee-based position, where a police officer is a taxpayer position.
That is correct.
Mayor.
Councilor Lee?
So, Raylene, when you say half would go back to general fund, where does the other half go back to?
The other half would go back to all the enterprises fund because, like I said, with the cost allocation plan of those departments, half stays in general fund and the other half goes to the cost allocation plan, which then we pass on that charge to streets, Parks and Rec, capital fund, water, wastewater.
So forgive the lack of complete understanding here, but when you say enterprise fund, that includes water and wastewater treatment and whatnot. So if we saved money that went back to enterprise fund and we were just saying we were coming up short in water, it could be redirected back to that so that we weren't coming up short.
Even if we made those adjustments, we would still come up short in water. Right now, I'm predicting a $2 million fund balance at the end of this year, which is not enough to operate currently.
Okay, so just say that again. We don't have enough to operate if we continue at this trajectory, but we're still increasing in enterprise funds in our budget by adding these positions. So it's so little that it doesn't matter? Is that what you're saying? We might as well increase it because, it doesn't make I know it's...
No, I think this is the proposal, and I will make adjustments wherever you feel that you need to make adjustments. With the water fund, I'm making you guys aware because the fee increases will be significant enough that I want you guys to be prepared for them when we do come forward with them.
And forgive me, if I'm prepared, that's one thing, but if a citizen is prepared to say, you're increasing my fees and you added more positions rather than not increasing my fees as much, that's what we're saying.
So, with the department, and I totally get, like, talking about the general fund fees and the cost allocation plan. When it comes to the water positions and those service levels, I'm not the expert on that. That's something that you'd have to talk to Rob about. I mean, I think this is just an overview to try to help everybody understand what's in the budget, because it doesn't show automatically in these reports. And so I wanted to make sure to highlight it.
Yeah, so I'm just, when you say that this year, our current budget year, we're $2 million short in the water department, I'm kind of thrown back by that.
So we're not gonna be short. We're gonna end the year with about $2 million, which is, usually we have about $10 million in there. And so that cash flow is reducing enough because of projects and so it's just part of that enterprise. There should have been probably a higher fee increase last year. But it's just that timing delay.
So we will not have to put in fund balance to make them whole.
No,
We've just gotta accommodate the future.
that is correct.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Just to follow up on Counselor Williams, but if we don't approve the new position, so I think I'm a little confused too. I don't know if you still are, but I am, I'll admit it. But if you don't approve those positions for the wages for new people, where can that money then be used? In any of these shortfalls or not? I guess as simple as I can understand it.
So I'm just gonna use the part-time finance position. So if you do not approve that, so it would be a reduction in finances budget of $23,000, which means that in the cost allocation plan, when I put that in for finances total budget, it would be $23,000 less, and it would go through the allocation, and that allocation is set by actual revenues and personnel costs. So it's two allocations, and so it would go through that allocation and allocate it to the budget. And so each of those departments would incrementally get a $23,000 reduction. It wouldn't go to just one department. Could be a little bit to streets, a little bit to parks, a little bit to, it just small amounts.
Right, I understand that, but the water department would stay within the those positions specifically?
Yes.
Or does the water department also get split up, just like you gave the example with finance, or does water department stay in water department?
So it would stay in water. So when you're looking at the budget, so let's just go to water. I'll show you.
Go to what? I'm sorry.
Under Public Works, under water, and if you turn to the second page under water, and you're gonna see about halfway through, says admin/payroll services.
I'm on it.
So
Thank you.
underneath that, so in 23, water paid $345,000 to the general fund to help operate the mayor, clerk, city council, all of the administrative departments within City Hall. In 24, we budgeted $293,000. And in 25, we are budgeting $531,000. So this is based off of it's not just one budget. So this number will only reduce incrementally based off of the total budgets for all of those departments.
Mr. Mayor, just to follow up, same as if you don't approve a position, maybe you don't need as much travel, you might not, because we bought new furniture, right? So I get that you're including all of those capital items as well, but all of those cell phones, all of that may reduce if you don't approve a position, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. So I'm still stuck on enterprise funds, because we're always told that enterprise funds stay in enterprise funds. We don't have the discretion to take those and use them in general fund for any reason. Is that correct?
So enterprise funds, we can't just transfer the fund balance to a general fund. But we can charge them an administrative fee, which is the cost allocation plan, to cover administrative costs for running City Hall. But it has to have it's called an indirect cost, essentially. And it has to have a good understanding and a consistent method every year to make sure we're charging an equitable amount among the enterprise funds.
So when we go back to the new positions where we got started on this because I didn't understand, we said some of these positions were being funded by enterprise funds. So those new positions, if they're not funded, that stays in enterprise funds?
That is correct. So
Okay.
if you don't fund the one that says Public Works Water right at the end, so if you don't fund the meter program coordinator, that doesn't get budgeted in the enterprise fund of water. And the water department does not add that position. That position does not run through the cap because it's not a general fund position. It is just a water position and is funded directly through the water fund.
So that would not decrease the deficit in enterprise funds if we didn't fund that?
So if you didn't fund it, it would reduce the budget request, which then potentially could decrease the cash use and the deficit per se.
So then, forgive me, but then following that train of thought would potentially decrease what we would need to increase fees, however minuscule it may be.
There is that chance, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Stoddick?
Mayor?
Yeah.
Raylene, on the allocation part of this in each department, did you take the actual expenditures that they've had over the last 2 or 3 years and prorate that out, or how does that work?
So every year we budget based off of, so for the admin, I'm trying to think back, but we use fiscal 23 revenues and fiscal 23 personnel costs to do the admin allocation. So we create 2 allocations and split it up, and then it creates a percentage. However, when we actually charge it, we only use actual expenditures. So if we budget, say we budget in water $50,000 for the cost allocation plan and for finance, but finance only spends 45, we will only charge 45 and not 50. That's
I was
based
just
on
concerned
actual.
that to make up some of the shortfalls, maybe in some of these other departments, that we might be charging some other department more to make that up. We don't do that, right?
No,
Okay.
we true it up every single year.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Dittenberg?
So not to get any more in the weeds with this, but let's head there anyway. So, when you put your cost allocation plan together, you use numbers. You just explained those. Does the accountant review those cost allocation plans? Do you have to have an approved cost allocation plan, or did that ever come before council, or?
It does not, I mean, if you want it to come before council, I'd be happy to have it come before council, but it does not. Part of the budget process, so like you see it in the budget amount, but nobody approves it. I mean, I run it by definitely the public works director, because there's a lot of, we don't want to overcharge the funds, obviously, but I guess you guys kind of approve it because you approve the budgets, and so that's, but not the allocation itself. If you want to change that, I'd be happy to bring it forward to you guys. Okay.
Don't look at me, I just know if you're dealing with the federal government, they require an approved cost allocation plan.
So yes, that is something a little bit different, but this one's kind of internal to charge indirect fees. If it was for the federal government, you definitely would get it. Okay, so we'll talk about COLA. I think that's COLA. So with COLA, like I said, we have 4% budgeted for all these positions. I kind of based that off of the CPI that I pulled in January, which is 3.1%. And so, but I do have costs for all the different amounts, and I would like to know what you foresee that you would like me to budget. Well, if you can pull up that next worksheet.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So I think that is a tough one to decide right now, if, depending on which way council goes with all these new positions. I mean, clearly we want to pay our employees as much as they deserve, certainly. However, if council ends up, the majority wants all 23 positions, then that may change my position on how much of the percentage should be.
That makes sense. So, as you can see, a 4% raise cost for this does not include fire union because we're in negotiations with them, but this includes every other department. So the total cost for 4% would be just under 1.2 million. And you can see it by fund how much that's going to be. And then the 3% cost, it's about $300,000 cheaper. You know, it kind of goes down incrementally. So with the breakdown of each fund and the impact. So we can adjust this in the reports pretty easily. We just need to know and have some direction on, I mean, and the requirement would be by August, I would need to balance the budget. So I think it's just a play on like how much and how much I'm able to budget for, while still balancing the budget with everything else that is requested.
So I have kind of a question for council. I'm hearing 4% COLA, but in my mind, I translate that different than a pay raise. So are we thinking a 4% COLA and then potential pay raises on top, or, I mean, because just like Councilor Doty said, it would really impact my decision on what employees we hired, depending on how much we were going to pay overall. Is there a difference, Raylene, or in because you and I have had the discussion before about fixed costs or where we have to be extremely careful. That's kind of where we're at and so, my question is, are we calling a 4% COLA a pay raise, or is there additional funding that we're going to look at in the future for raises, or can you give me some idea there?
So the 4% COLA is the pay raise. I mean, we can make that 2% COLA, 2% performance-based. I mean, there's lots of different options. Like, however, I did the 4% because CPI is increasing, the cost to buy things and the purchasing power is increasing. Now, if we did a 4%, my recommendation would be, and we can definitely talk to Shelley and bring her up too. We set the levels, and so would be to only increase that 3%. So as our employees are moving further within the pay line, and not just bringing in new employees at the same rate that we just increased current employees to. So
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor?
Go ahead.
The only problem I have with COLA is in the real world out there, it's based on performance. You just don't get a flat cost of living raise. You just don't. And is there something in the works that we have that if somebody performs, they'll get it? If they don't, they don't get it.
Mr., can I add to his comments? Because I think we're straight on the
Yeah.
same thing. So I think it said the national COLA, so to speak, in the terms that you're using, Counselor Allgood, was 3.1, correct? So I'm in line with, if we're putting in an eval system and we have top performers in the eval system that would be getting the same as a average performer, so to speak, I'm in agreement with Counselor Stoddard that maybe we should look at those top performer, just throwing this out there as an example, people get a 3.1 that are meeting the standards because that is the national percentage, so to speak. And then we elevate that, but our top performers shouldn't get the same exact amount as someone that is an average performer, in my opinion, so.
Yeah, no, that's true, and we have had those discussions of doing that and separating those out, 'cause for years it had been that used to be called the KRAs, and I don't even know what that stands for, to be honest. And it was flat, and whether you were the bottom of the barrel just getting by or the top was the same. So I know we've had those discussions of how do we get there and getting it to where you could have, 'cause like I said, there is inflation, things like that, to make sure you do have some of that, but again, allowing those top performers, and then over time they start to separate themselves. So, 10 years from now, if you're a top performer for 10 years, you've got a pretty good separation from those kind of bottom, or not really bottom, but say middle, of the pack on that. So we have had those discussions. I don't know if Shelley does want to come forward and talk, or if you want to cover any of the discussions we've had and kind of the direction we're going in that way.
Mr. Mayor, I'd add to that and go further and say, because we're just now implementing for the first time an employee performance evaluation, if we have underperforming employees, or perhaps even worse, employees that are on performance improvement plans, perhaps they shouldn't even be considered, or considered for even less than a 3%. To just give everybody 4% that breathes the air in Caldwell City Hall and every city employee, I don't think that's wise expenditure of money. Why would we have the performance
I agree.
evaluations in the first place if it doesn't matter, if everybody's gonna get the same thing?
I totally agree with
Agree.
that. It was very weird last year, just giving a flat COLA. Like, where it came beforehand, that was not the case. Like, we really had a lot of different percentages and amounts based off of evaluations. I'll let Shelley speak to kind of where we're at with the status.
So, Mr. Mayor, she's coming up. I agree with that too. Either it's a graduated, if it's 3.1 average to live, let's just say it that way, a COLA, then an average performer would get 3.1. And if there's room to go up to a 4 for someone that's performing very well, and then I don't know how many steps we have. Is it 4 or 5? I'm guessing you'll tell us here in a second, but it should be graduated with each step, depending on top performers versus average performers, for sure. Underperformers generally, if you're on a PIP, if you're on a PIP, it would be held until at least you came off the PIP, for sure, in my experience, but.
Mayor, council members, I'm Shelley Boggy, HR Director. So as you know, we piloted a performance evaluation form. I brought it to you in a workshop back in January, and we had supervisors, we did trainings, and had supervisors evaluate employees for January, February, and March of this year. I have received those evaluations. I've been looking at them. They appear to be very objective. There were a few that I feel like maybe were embellished, or that the supervisors were very conservative, but I would say overall I felt pretty good about the scores. I did not get evaluations on everyone, and as well as sworn police and firefighters do not have their evaluation system in place. So this year, because we did it kind of really fast and it was a pilot, Raylyn and I talked about, did we really want to bring forth something that was part COLA and part performance, where we didn't have good scores on all employees? right, across the city. We didn't feel that that was a fair thing to do. That being said, as I stand here as the HR director, I only know of one employee who is on a performance improvement plan. Everybody else we have dealt with as far as poor performers. I would say we probably still have a handful across the city, but they've either left voluntarily or involuntarily over the last year and a half, or before I got here, right? But I think the city has done a good job of holding people accountable and expecting that they meet those. That being said, I do think it's really hard to create criteria based on performance where we don't have a system citywide that's fully functional.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I don't think the city does a very good job of holding people accountable, so I'll disagree on that. Secondly, why hasn't everyone received an eval? Again, talk about accountability. If everyone's supposed to turn in an eval and people haven't.
Yep, I have not followed up with them. I certainly can do that. I do not make supervisors do things,
We
right?
absolutely should make supervisors turn in an eval.
Well, I certainly can go back and follow up and find out who did not do that. Again, police and fire don't have a system in place. I would say probably I have 200 plus evaluations, but I need to go back and look at who we got and who we didn't get. So that's not all supervisors came to the training that I provided. I did a number of trainings. I don't make decisions about supervisors and what they do or don't do. That's not HR. HR doesn't have a lot of authority over what employees or supervisors do.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not saying that you should make them do it, but whoever is that supervisor should make them do it.
Absolutely.
And based on my experience, you hold the pay raise until the evaluations are done. People don't just get to opt out of it. And this is what I'm saying. You say we're holding people accountable. We are not. If it is a requirement to turn in an evaluation and they don't, then that supervisor should hold them accountable for not doing that. And if the employee's eval isn't in, then you hold the pay, which forces the supervisor to turn in the evals, or you hold the supervisor's pay until the evals are turned in. You don't get to opt out of not doing an evaluation system. The council decided to move an evaluation system forward. If the policy doesn't reflect that and says you can opt in or out, it certainly wasn't my understanding of it. My understanding was everyone gets an eval so that we can put this system into place. So in my opinion, you don't get to opt out of either issuing an eval or receiving one.
Yeah, and I would agree. So evaluations were received the first week of April, and we're at May 23rd, I think. Today's May 23rd. So I've been collecting those and reviewing them. I have not gone back to the laundry list of employees to see who we've received and who we haven't. I just have not had the time to be able to do that with the other things that I've got going on. So
I'm not blaming you.
I understand. I'm just trying to say, I feel like we're still in the process of evaluating the pilot project for the performance evaluations. And so I think that's part of that, is going back and seeing who we got, who we didn't, where all those fell. So that piece has not been done yet. When I say we hold people accountable, we have done letters of reprimand, we have dismissed people, we have suspended people, we've written performance evaluations. I've worked across with all directors on holding employees accountable across the city, and so I really do feel that we are holding people accountable and addressing performance issues, so we don't have employees who are not performing and not worthy of raises.
And I think it's important that this is a pilot program as we're going forward, and it was just started last month. So we're still, as Shelley mentioned, working through it, seeing the bugs, taking them, what worked good, what didn't, as regards to the questioning, the scoring, all of that. So that's why this kind of is this pilot program, to help us to see how can we refine this, get it to where it does get the results that we're looking for in that regards. And yes, as we work through this, it will not be optional to do that. And some of the things too is how often is it quarterly? Is it once a year? Is it twice a year? So those are the things looking at as well. And then is it is it optional to do it quarterly, and then you have to have one at least once a year. But if they feel, if there's a supervisor or a appointed official feels that in their department it works better to do it quarterly to check in, they could. So those are things still kind of working out, ironing out, see how does it work best in each department, on that, as we move forward in that program.
Right, and it did start in January, so we did all the training and all of that, so they've had a little bit of time. And I did hear loudly from council back in January that they didn't want the quarterly written, so I think it'll be the annual written, and we'll have to bring back the forms and the policies back to city council for that final approval. I think we learned some things, and we want to tweak those forms and process and the self-evaluation that we've been using. But we just didn't feel like we were ready to make a pitch to you to say, here's the criteria for the COLA, and then how to give performance increases based on performance and merit, that kind of thing, because it wasn't done. When I did talk to Gallagher, when we wrapped up the class and comp study, they are the company that looked at all of our jobs, and I asked Alan, I said, what would you recommend the city do for pay increases for next year, right? For a COLA, and then to move the pay schedule, and he recommended that we go very much in line with CPI, which is what Raylan is recommending. So it's that 3 to 4%.
Councilor Williams, did you have a?
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor. Yes,
Mhm.
a question and then a comment. And if nobody's blaming Ms. Boggy for not holding people accountable, who is? Who's accountable for making sure these are turned in? Because Mr. Doty just said, we're not blaming you. Well, who is to blame if this isn't being done as directed? That's my question. My comment, because this is on the record, and again, I don't know much, but for 17 years, I've watched sergeants do performance evaluations on employees. So to say on the record that the police aren't doing performance evaluations, I don't like it at all, because I've watched it done for 17 years.
Mayor, council members, I have not seen a completed police performance evaluation. So if they are being done, they are not coming to HR, and I am not seeing them. I have not seen one. They were part of the focus group back in November, and Sergeant Krupper was very much involved in the final form that we've created. It was pitched to Chief Ingram, and he wanted to tweak it a little bit for sworn officers. I mean, there's different things that they're evaluated on. That was right at the time that Deputy Chief Sopowaga was leaving to go on the FBI Academy. So he and I met once, and then he and I have not been able to reconvene since he has been back. But it's very much in progress. But yeah, I have not seen any completed evaluations for employee files come to my office.
I don't know about that. I just know it's not accurate to say they're not being done.
I guess I'm saying it because I haven't seen any that have been completed.
Yeah, and
So
I would
that's
guess they
where
are,
that
and
comes
probably
from.
they're in-house, would be my guess. I know Chief's here on that. I can't hear him. Oh. I know it's loud back there.
Oh, sorry.
And so kind of to touch on the,
Is
you
your
know-
mic on?
No, I'm out of the box.
Okay.
I think so.
Static
Usually,
in the back.
yeah, I know there's a
Mr.
lot
Mayor.
of that back there. So, evaluations for police officers.
Yes.
So kind of the question is, are they being done? Is the records being held in-house, like within the police department, and not relayed over to HR? Or how are evaluations being done in the police department was the question.
So they're still being done, but we're in the process of redoing them with Shelley. And she is correct that when Deputy Chief Sopowaga went to the FBI Academy in January, he's been tasked with that project, but we've kind of been waiting to see where we're at with that. But forever they've been done, because there's employees that have had, dozens in their file that I've looked through before any disciplinary procedures or anything like that.
Mr. Mayor?
They're still being done.
The file is-
Yes, the personnel file at the police department. We keep our own personnel files here per IDAPA.
Yes, Councilor
I
Doty.
still believe, I believe in the chief, and I think that we can have an eval on everyone by October. So if we decide to do a graduated step for every employee, same as your trainings, if you provided trainings and they're required to be there and they're not, they need to be held accountable for not attending those trainings or working out an alternative solution to you. So that's the accountability I'm talking about. If they want a pay raise and they want us to give them the money that they deserve, then the supervisors need to do the evaluation. The chief can have an evaluation to you on file by October, I'm sure. On, Counselor Williams', comment, meaning I would hold the supervisor accountable. The HR can't run around all over town, in my opinion, looking for evals. So you hold the supervisor accountable that's not doing it. And then whoever's not doing it, that person's supervisor should counsel them in regards to not getting that done and the importance of that.
Mr. Mayor and Councilor Doty, and as you know, as a former police officer yourself, police departments are paramilitary organizations. We have a chain of command and a rank structure, and we hold our people accountable. And I can stand by that 100%. But what I will tell you is that I agree with people should get raises based on performance. However, in police departments, it's hard to put a standard of metric in to measure performance, because then we talk about quotas and are people performing, are they writing more tickets, are they putting more people in jail? So we have to come up with something that's within the law, and I don't want to be forced into something that I don't agree with for our people to put us in hot water later. So we are working on it.
Mr. Mayor, 100% agree. There's plenty of police departments out there, as you know, that have not included quotas, so we certainly don't want to start that, or how many tickets you write. There are some general categories that can cover innovative thinking and creating programs and things of that nature, or saving taxpayer money by a program that they create. So
absolutely,
I know you're aware of this. There are many evaluation systems for police officers that don't rely on quotas or how many tickets you write.
Absolutely.
So.
Councilor Dittenberg?
I've grabbed my microphone like a dozen times, but I had to push it back because we need a light on it. All right.
Coming, soon.
So, a couple different things. First of all, I think, we probably want to move towards a performance-based raise system. In today's world, it's all about performance. It's all about your contribution to the organization. And I think there might be something that we need to do with changing the culture of the organization. If you have 50% of the people with evaluations, there's 50% of the people that just don't care. They just don't care that they're evaluated. Maybe they don't want to be evaluated. And maybe the policy going forward, respective or irrespective of this process, is unless we have 80% evaluations across the city, no pay raises. We changed the culture of the organization. We changed it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
And the only thing I would disagree with is I think everyone, whether you want an evaluation or not, you get one.
That's right.
Is that what you're, okay.
I agree.
Yeah, even, no matter 80%, not everyone gets one. They can refuse to sign it if they so choose, but everyone gets an evaluation.
Like Counselor Dittenberg, I've grabbed my microphone many times, but this has been, so kind of comes down to, Shelley, as we're going forward with this budget process, we need to know that there will be an evaluation system in place that we can count on for pay raises October 1st. Can we count on that? I mean, will that be in place that that when we put our budget together, we know that 350 employees or however many in this city will be responding to that?
Like I said, I haven't got any for police or fire. If they are out there, we certainly can get those, but that's a good 100 plus. And I think
I'm just saying by October
I think I have
1st.
about 200 something in my 200 plus in my office probably. So, I need to go back through and see how many we're actually missing. It may be less than we think. I truly don't know as I stand here right now. I need to go back and match those up with all the employees, to be sure what that looks like. So, the forms need to be tweaked and the policy needs to be updated and come back to City Council for approval. I don't know the timing of what that looks like, if that could be June, July, August. I do think it's doable.
Follow up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of the buck stops at your office.
Yeah.
Can the council know that by October 1st we'll have an evaluation system in place?
Yeah, it sounds like we were able to do that, because obviously we need the staff to do it, and I know that we do have a great staff in the HR department, so then working with police and fire to make sure.
As we go forward and plan raises and budgets, we need to know whether we're gonna be able to count on that evaluation system when we move forward with that.
Yeah. Yep, so.
Mr. Mayor. I can tell you that as the largest department in the city, my department will be done far before October.
Yeah, and we probably would want it, 'cause the budget year starts October first. And so I guess it depends when, so those raises, obviously, if, you know, we're shooting to get all those, evaluations by October first, the raises won't go into effect on October first. It'd be after that. So there'd be, I guess, some salary savings, 'cause they go into effect, you know, after those are done, and then evaluating and incorporating those into the system.
Can I,
Yes, please.
about time frame, so essentially, if we wanna build it into the budget, I mean, I can build a percentage for everybody, but if it's really gonna be tiered at a larger or smaller percentage, then the best option that I would need is have everything in before August first to be able to calculate it. And the reason for that is 'cause our budget hearing is August 20th, and so I have to have all final numbers in before then.
I agree. It takes several weeks to calculate those evaluations, so, yeah, long before October.
In my opinion, 2 months is plenty of time. People, if they're held accountable, will get those evaluations in if their pay raise relies on that evaluation being in.
I do think that's doable. I think the next step is you gotta figure out the criteria. Like the chief said, you have to identify what is exemplary, right? Or what scores on that evaluation are gonna equal a percentage, or you've got to figure out that criteria so that the top performers do get that extra money. So that does take a bit of time and calculation, right, of what that looks like.
Yeah, and that's what kind of with the pilot program that we've been working through, is finding that so that you're not, because you have to be able to prove, right, show that they did not get a raise just because they're friends with their supervisor. That there's hard, fast criteria to show they did these, that is why they received a 4.5% raise instead of the 2% like the person sitting next to them. So that's the thing, is make sure that the criteria is legal, things of that nature, so we don't get complaints and potential lawsuits of, you know, hey, you give him a raise because he's your friend and I didn't get the same because I don't bowl with you, or whatever it is. So that's really, that's the most, I think, difficult part, is make sure you have that right criteria.
Mr. Mayor, can I add on to that?
Yeah.
Right, and we're not recreating the wheel here. We can certainly have our own, but this has been done for decades, the evaluation system. If the supervisor, I guess I don't know what the final form was. I thought we approved a final form. Shouldn't the supervisor be marking whether they're exemplary, or, because not everyone writes the same, it's not all a checkbox, but shouldn't the supervisor be checking if they're exemplary, above average, or an average employee based on the supervisor's opinion?
So the supervisor, you guys approved a pilot form. We were going to use it and then see what we needed to tweak. It was a pretty good form and it worked really well. I've gotten really good feedback on it. There were scores of 5, right? So 1 to 5 is what they rated in all the different 19 competencies. And so then they do an average. So the overall score is an average of all of those scores. So you're going to end up with 3.5s and 4.2s and, you know, all over the place, right? So then the criteria needs to say if you have a 4 and above, maybe you get a 2% increase, right? If you have a 3 is solid performance. Anything below a 3 is I'm struggling or I'm not performing most of the time. So you just have to set kind of those parameters. Maybe you only want to give scores to people who have 4s and 5s. I would say, in my experience over 25 years in working in HR, is when you tie money directly to performance scores, all of a sudden everybody's getting 4s and 5s. And like I said before, I think a few were embellished. I even got one that was all 5s, which I think is almost impossible, right, to be that great. But I think people were pretty objective. I was very pleasantly surprised at how objective supervisors were in evaluating their employees. And I would say most people were scored right around the 3.5 overall. And so I don't know if that's high enough to get an increase. You know, I don't know what you're thinking about those top performers, but it's definitely doable. We get our guidance from you guys and we can make things happen. We tried to hurry and get these things done, right? So we tried to do the training. I brought in another trainer. I did some training. We did the forms. We did some focus groups. We followed up with supervisors. We're just, we didn't quite get the bow tied on it in time to bring something to you today, as far as a COLA and a performance merit
Mr. Mayor,
increase.
so below a 3 would be not performing average, so anyone below a 3 should be on a PIP?
So I could get a below 3 if I get some 2s, right,
Right.
and things, or I get some 3s. It's an average of those 19. So you take all the scores of the 19, divide it by 19, and that gives you the average.
I
would
understand.
say, again, people were 3 or above. I only know of one employee as I stand here that's on a PIP, and I don't know, I don't believe there were any. There might be one person, a brand new employee still in training, that was some 2s in there. But I would say by and far, the majority of employees were 3 and above.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
So based on the scoring, if someone's not on a PIP, then they're meeting the average even if they have 1s all down the page. If they're not on a PIP, then they're meeting the average. However, we may want to look at, I've never been scored by a score on a sheet. It's the supervisor checks. Either you're exemplary in this category, or you're average in this category, you're above average in this category, and you have enough that eventually, if you have 2 exemplaries and 2 above average, then the supervisor gets the final decision. Are they an exemplary employee, or are they an average employee? Or if you have 3 exemplaries and 1 average, then maybe they're still an exemplary employee, right? And so I'm not sure about the numbers, but I will say this, since it's the one we have in place currently, that if they're not on a PIP, even if they only have a 5, right? If there's 19 categories, if they only have 19, then they're meeting the standards of the department if they're not on a PIP.
Mr. Mayor,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're talking about something that really needs to be discussed outside of this, but the bottom line is the managers should be the one that decide the evaluations of the employees. If the managers aren't doing it, then the department heads have the wrong people managing. HR instituted this performance evaluation.
Agreed.
Let the managers decide what the scores are. Let the department heads inform HR what was decided, and we will pay increases based on performance.
And I would add to that, yes, it should be up to the appointed official to determine if someone gets all 5s, maybe they deserve all 5s. I know that it's happened before, though some of the common thinking can be no one can get all 5s. Someone can get all 5s, and it should be up to the department head if that evaluation is good, not a single person at HR saying if I earned it or not.
Right.
Because they're directly involved with that individual working.
If we don't have the right department head, then we should know so we could do something about that.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? And I think, I know there was some talk about if you were below a 2 average, you're probably on a PIP because you're getting a lot of 1s, and that's where that kind of triggers. So 1 is you're basically failing. 2 is where there's some improvement that can be done. I think, it doesn't mean if you get a 2 that you should be on a PIP, you're not completing things. It's just there's things you can improve on, and then 3 is that right where you should be on it. So there's some, that get 2s and 3s and 4s and averages out. So you may be below a 3 and not on a PIP.
Mm-hmm.
If you're below a 2 average, then most likely you are, because that means you have a lot of 1s, which is going to trigger something like that.
And Mr. Mayor, I'm good with
Mhm.
that, and
Yeah.
that's what I'm
Mhm.
saying. If they're
Yeah.
not on a PIP
Mhm.
though,
Yeah.
and they have some 2s, then they are meeting the standard at that time. To include a new employee, let's say a probationary employee that maybe you just hired the day before the evals due, right? And I can only speak from my experience, but there was learning and I can't remember what the name is, we gave it to them, right? But they certainly got the raise, because they're a probationary employee, you can fire them at any time. If they're hired today and their pay raise is due tomorrow, well then, they get the pay raise, right? Until they prove they're not. You don't punish them for being a new employee, so to speak. Punish isn't the right word. You do not hold back the pay raise because they're a new employee. Their performance in the year to come would dictate, or whatever the probationary period is. Police officers are a year and other employees are 6 months, so.
There's actually no probationary period, just for police and fire. everybody else is at will. So, and you can write it into the criteria, right? If somebody's on a PIP, they don't get it. If somebody has a disciplinary letter in their file the last 6, 12 months, they don't get it, right? Or they're brand new, they don't get it. So that's all
Easier
part of
then,
that
right?
criteria, yeah,
Even
for
easier,
sure.
if they're at will, they don't get punished because they were just hired yesterday. Because at any time in here, if they don't meet it, then they're,
May I make
Yeah.
a suggestion
Uh-huh.
so we could perhaps move on? I don't know. Can we, at this moment, suggest that Raylene continue with the 4% that she started with, but with the understanding that by the time we get to August, we will have come up with that determination of the graduated COLA, and I suspect it will be graduated, but for today,
sure.
continue with the 4% number so that we can keep moving forward. Does
It'll
that
only,
sound
only
reasonable?
save her money.
Right, exactly. If it's
Yeah.
not spent because they got 3% or 3.5% or something different,
Yeah.
it's just money saved in the bank, but that way we can move on. Is that fair?
I can definitely do that. No, will you bring up the PowerPoint presentation?
You
Mr.
did say we'd be done at 8, right?
Yeah.
What time is it? 6? Yeah, we got 2 more hours.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to make one more
Yeah,
comment.
uh-huh.
Probably for Shelley, there's so many examples in private business of how they grade people, position descriptions and all that. I would think they could come up with some system, because we all do it. I mean,
Mhm.
they don't just
We're not
give private
creative.
business a raise just because the CPI went up 3%.
Mhm.
You gotta perform to get it. And I'm sure there's a lot of examples out there if they wanna just call around and ask, so.
So on top of the COLA, there's other things that we're kind of considering, with compensation. With the class and comp, we got most of the work done. I will say there was some departments that money did not go far enough. Like, we were able to get half of what we needed done, and especially with the water fund. For example, for CDL drivers in wastewater, the starting wage is $25, same with streets, but in water, it's 23. And so we want to make sure that we're matching that type of classification across those departments pretty evenly. And so, but there wasn't enough class and comp funds in the water fund for us to do that. We were able to get a little bit, but not all the way. So, though it's not budgeted right now, we are looking to finish that portion of the class and comp for the water fund, which is approximately about $100,000. That's including benefits. That's not just salaries and benefits. And people do already have to have that certain qualification with the CDL to get those increases. If they don't, then they wouldn't qualify for those increases. So, the other part of class and comp that we're kind of working through is the over 7-year city longevity. So these are employees that have been with the city 7 years or more, and we're looking at their compa ratios, which is where they fall within the level that they're currently placed, and seeing, we want to make it equal for the raises that they didn't get and see where we can go. I don't have an amount of how much this is going to be because we're still working through this process, identifying and stuff. But this is something that impacts almost all funds, and so I wanted to make you aware of it, that there will be changes in the budget for this. Two things. Obviously, we have the fire union. I've talked to them about 4%. We're in negotiations. I don't know where that'll end up, but I just want to bring that up. Like, they have a lot of moving pieces in the first week of that. We're starting it in June for the negotiations there, so. And then lastly, is the Spanish-speaking certification pay. So we have identified certain employees across the city that currently they help with their departments with Spanish speaking, that we're not currently compensating them. And we're looking at like a certification pay of like a 25-cent or 50-cent. Is it more than that? Or is it 25 cents? I don't think we've landed on a specific amount yet, but implementing this to allow employees who do interpretation at City Hall or at their departments, that they get compensated for that. So once we have that policy set, and we would bring that forward and be able to budget for that amount as well. Any questions on this?
Sounds great.
For the Employee Health Trust, so as you know, our benefits are run through the Employee Health Trust. And, right now, we don't know of what the current benefit increases are gonna be. Last year, it went up about 6% in cost. And so, if we do have an increase, that it would change both the city and employee premium. Usually we will know this in August, so it's gonna be something that I will bring up at the budget, hearing. And so it's kind of a final decision, final balance. We kind of try to split the cost. With Employee Health Trust, there are, quarterly reports we do, and they require us to have a certain amount of reserve based off of our claims. Currently, we're meeting that reserve. We kind of have double that. But if that was to ever drop, or we had more claims than that, the city would have to up those reserves. But right now, we are looking good in that fund, so just want to talk about that. These are the current, costs, kind of breakdown, for the city and the employee. So, and then for firefighters, we pay the exact same on the city cost. The employees have a little bit different because they pay into a different trust fund. Okay, so these are two budgets within the general fund that kind of I oversee, but they're kind of high level. Many departments end up using them. So, for City Hall, it's within the general fund. We'll kind of talk about that. So, City Hall does not have any positions, and I just named it City Hall. It's kind of like City Hall Annex. This is where the contingency funds are budgeted. This is where the transfers are budgeted. So, you'll see that there's been an increase in costs for the Nancola Center, because the repair and maintenance is much higher there than it is at the old City Hall. Same with the utilities. Those are much higher. On top of that, we have the security services for the public meeting. That was not budgeted before and is going to be budgeted for 25. Instead of using our police department and paying overtime, it's much cheaper to do the security services, and it frees up an officer to go on the streets. This 50% of these costs that are budgeted, other than the contingency, are reimbursed through the cost allocation plan. So the utilities, the repair and maintenance that's done are reimbursed through, so City Hall, like all these costs do get reimbursed and get charged to the enterprise fund. This includes like the electricity, so a lot of the electricity cost gets funded through this 600 division, and then we, instead of charging, just allocating different amounts, we just charge it all to this and then ask for reimbursement after the fact. Same with the city phones. So, any questions on this budget?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Ray Lynn, I just, the 222% stands out. Might explain that one.
I'm sorry?
That's under the city council deal?
We doing city council or city hall?
Or do you just want to incorporate that into what you're doing now, or it's separate?
Are you
Separate.
doing the city council?
Yeah.
Oh,
Flip it over to city hall.
we
Yeah,
can,
I know.
we can talk about that. I didn't actually budget for the city council. I did not input those numbers, but I
Okay.
can tell you what that is, within the community relations project.
Okay.
That's the amount you wanna know.
Mr. Mayor, before we jump to city council though, I suppose it's splitting hairs a little bit, but the increase for security services really isn't that much because the city was paying overtime, as you stated, for police. It just wasn't coming out of the city hall fund. So what you're admitting is you owe, Chief Ingram a reimbursement from city hall for what he paid. No, I'm just kidding.
If I could do that, I would. I don't know where it is, but. I will say I talked to, I believe it's Sergeant Crupper, and he was so excited that, that we were no longer doing that stuff.
And Mr. Mayor?
Mhm.
So on that City Hall cleaning services, same thing, 'cause now we have an additional building, right?
So the cleaning services, that is not actually for like facilities or custodial. That is for windows cleaning, drink cleaning, carpet cleaning, things that the facilities department
Adding a new-
cannot do on the
Right.
Nangola Center.
Right. Give me 1 second, I'm still looking, Mr. Mayor.
So,
Mr.
Councilman
Mayor?
Sadek, I know you
Oh.
had a question
Oh.
on the community relations and
Not one out.
the city council budget.
Yeah.
So
When we're
let me
taking that
list
out
to you
now?
what is budgeted.
It's 66,160 is the
Where you at?
quote on it.
So
We're gonna-
there is,
222%.
yep, so there's $15,000 for an American, or the AAFV donation, which we kind of increased that from 10,000 this last year to now 15. There's $15,000 for the senior center. There's $15,000 for the Veterans Hall. There's $5,000 for the Caldwell Health Coalition. There's $15,000 for Metro. There's, sorry, it goes back and forth. There's $5,000 for the Senior Farmers Market. There's $5,000 in miscellaneous. There's $2,000 in the Winter Wonderland donation. And there's $10,000 for 4th of July festivities, which is mini flags, porta potty rental, bounce house rentals, miscellaneous.
Caleb, where was it coming from before, though, I think? 'Cause if it was 27 in 24, 27,000, now it's 87. Is that the one you're talking about, Counselor Stoddard?
Yeah.
So, we've been giving that, right? But clearly, that's way over 27. So, I think that's what did it get pushed into the city-county budget, even though it was coming from someone else's budget?
And I can jump in there too, Raylan. So these are a lot of numbers that we kind of put in together on it. So we kind of, based off what some of the discussion of council, when like Metro came and AFV, there was talk about the city council wants to give more money to those. So those were all increased from what was last year. So that's a good portion of it. And then the two other areas was, some of those were kind of half from the mayor, half from the council. And so just to not appear that there's like a slush fund in the mayor's section, a lot of that was moved to the council. And so you'll see a decrease in the mayor's of $9,000 of what that was moved. And for example, the senior farmers market, it was half council, half mayor. So with this budget, felt let's just move that all to the council. And so that's why you see that decrease in the mayor's, because that was moved to that. And then lastly is on, for example, with the flags that are handed out during the 4th of July parade. It's actually it's about $4,000 to purchase those flags. And then the porta potties. So what was happening was, so with the 4th of July, we've turned that into a fundraiser for the veterans on that. And so that money was coming out of the funds that were raised, so it's reducing the amount that we were able to donate to the veterans. So we moved that, the proposal, and again, this is dependent on the city council, the proposal is moving those costs to this community relations, because that is a community relation event, the 4th of July, and then that allows more of a donation to be given to the veterans. So for example, if $50,000 was raised, instead of taking out, $5,000 now for flags and $3,000 for the porta potties, now you can give that full $50,000 rather than the $48,000. So that's why those increases were on that, in that regards to that amount.
So, since you mentioned yours, Mr. Mayor,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to keep skipping around, but you have 39, like you said, budgeted this year.
Mhm.
So where do those go? Who's receiving that money then?
And so, yeah, Freeland would have that on the, similar to that, what was pulled up
Trying to
on-
get all these
yeah.
in my
Mhm.
head as to who's all receiving, because we're up to, with my math, 126,000 out of the
Mhm.
budget that we're giving to different entities.
Mhm.
Could, sorry to interrupt, could we get a list though? I see some of you writing it down. Could we
Mhm.
just get that list so we could be evaluating it and giving it some thought? I really hate making decisions on the fly, and I know no decisions are being made tonight anyway. But in order for me to make a decision, I'd like to see that list and give it some thought. And furthermore, I'd like to be reminded, I guess, that while the amount budgeted is $60,000, any of those expenditures would have to come back to city council first to be approved. These aren't automatic, or are they? Or could we at some point determine we want to give that somewhere else if we wanted to throughout the year that was community outreach? Or has this been pre-decided for us, it's just being labeled as city council?
I think it's kind of,
And I think, I'll jump in, sorry to cut you off. So this is where you do get to decide. Like, these are just numbers. I know, like, when Metro came, and I think the
Past
senior
examples.
center, there was mention, hey, we want to give AAFE more money, we should give them $15,000. And so that's kind of the information we took. But then again, it's up to you. And so it would be good, we can have that printout next time, so you could say, okay, yes, we want the 15 here, we don't want it here, we want to reduce it or add it or whatever it is. And so then that way you are reviewing that and approving that of your accord of where and how much, where you want the money to go and how much money you want to go to those organizations.
Yeah, if we
Well,
had
Mike,
last
yeah,
year's
Mike.
numbers, that would help us too.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor Rayland, I hope these would be projections based upon what was spent last year and not necessarily tying us into any certain contribution.
so that is correct. I know that, how about when advocates of family violence came and presented and they asked for the 15,000, I think that unless you guys say, no, we're only giving 10, which is what we gave last year, like, I think that's kind of their expectation.
Do you have one? Go ahead, I
Yeah.
can wait a
Mhm.
second.
Quick question, this is just a general question, Raylene,
Mhm.
but just looking at the city hall budget, at the back page, total revenue and expenses, the revenues are, 44,000, the expenses are 45,000 and some. So we have, and this is just small numbers, but it's kind of the point overall in the budget, we have a deficit of 1,700 and change. So when we see something like that, are we gonna say, we're gonna cut the budget $1,700 so it balances? Or are we gonna say we're
I
gonna
don't see the
take money out of
1,700.
savings? As we go through all these, what's the thought?
Oh, I see.
It's actually 1.7 million, not 1,700.
Yeah.
And like I said,
point even
when I
stronger now.
brought this to you, it's not balanced. But unless we have planned use of fund balance, which we kind of used, or we planned use of fiscal year '24, almost all of our fund balance that was available, and we don't want to necessarily dip into reserves, that number needs to be zero.
That's what I was wondering. So, yeah, I totally read that wrong. Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
So when I see that, as we're moving along, we need to cut 1.7 million.
And I think between, like I said, I was working on this and trying to really balance it, and so it was a point in time that I printed these out. And so as time goes on, and I used estimates on some things, so the revenue can still be adjusted and the expenditures can be adjusted, because I had to use estimates on some things, and as they refine, that number should decrease down, so.
And speaking of revenues, I apologize, my mic wasn't on before, I didn't realize that. Speaking of revenues, has the county given us a date when they can give us hard numbers?
So I got very preliminary new construction and annexation numbers, but they're very, very, very preliminary. And so usually I get those the first week of July.
That late?
Yeah, that's kind of the statutory mandate, but I'm hoping that we'll get them in June, and so I'll be able to present them at the last budget workshop
Okay,
on the 25th.
okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
So is the proposal then, the only way to make up the 1.7, because I have 1.6 at the beginning today, is to raise fees?
So
how would you say how are we gonna make that up? That's quite a bit of money.
I will say 500,000 of that is gonna be a discussion with Rob in planning and zoning, and Brett in building, because those fees, we have to make adjustments, but that amount has not been determined yet, but they are short just over $500,000. And so that amount is gonna be raised in fees.
Okay, that still leaves 1.2.
It does.
So do we need to cut 1.2 out of the budget?
No, it's something, like I said, I still have other revenues that I have to look at. I have estimates with the ICRIMP because I did not get that back. So that amount can be adjusted, as well as other things can be adjusted. It's just a work in process.
Okay.
The big thing is gonna be that potentially could lead to other issues that we'd have to talk about long-term, is gonna be if the health insurance goes up significantly. And that's gonna be, we've got a word from our consultant that, our stop-loss contract, which is what prevents us from going over on our claims, could potentially go up about 40%. And if that does, then that could increase our premiums that we charge to both the city and the employee quite a bit.
I think the word is very important, she said, is work in progress.
It is.
If you remember, usually it's June, July when we're looking through this, and it really cut short for Raylene on that. So that's why we're starting a month earlier than typical, and so that's why a lot of this is still a work in progress, because there's still a lot of gray out there. These are the best information numbers we have, but a lot of this can change, but we just want to make sure there's adequate time for Raylene, so she's not working 90-hour weeks for the entire month of July and August to try to get this all done. So starting earlier, so there is more vagueness, which we apologize for that, but again, it just helps Raylene and her staff to have a little bit more time at the end to be able to put it all together. Councilor Dittenberg?
Mr. Mayor, Raylene, so I would assume that as a financial person, you have measured the numbers on the extremes on both ends. So playing it conservative, this is what we're looking at. However, you're going to get more numbers, and you anticipate within the margins that number would decrease some.
Yes, and here's how I budget. I am always more conservative on revenues and less conservative on expenditures, because revenues don't always come in as planned, but expenditures will always come in higher. So, I think with more information, especially as the year goes on, as I can see the trends that things are coming in, I'll be able to have more concise numbers on the revenue to still be conservative, but not overstate revenues.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just didn't know if we're supposed to be bouncing all over this thing or not. I do have one on City Hall. Are we still on City Hall?
We're still on City Hall.
Okay. So there's a new one, admin facilities of 53,000 that wasn't in the previous years.
That is correct.
Help
So
me out.
facilities is its own department that the entirety of facilities is allocated among the departments. It's not charged to one fund. It's allocated, the actual costs are allocated to all the departments and buildings that it's based off square footage of the buildings that they clean. So this $53,000 is for the Nancolis Center portion of the City Hall that is not fee-based. So if the building portion in the building department is charged for this, engineering is charged for this, but this is kind of clerk, mayor, everybody that is not fee-based. And this includes not only the custodians and the facilities, but it also includes all of the supplies that stock the bathroom and the cleaning supplies. Any other questions on the City Hall portion? The only other thing I wanted to bring up, because when Stephen presents economic development, which I was thinking, but I don't,
Economic, is that in here?
I might have not printed their report in this, and I apologize. I was just thinking about this. I'm like, I don't think it's
Can we wait
actually
on
in
that one
here.
then too, Mr. Mayor?
Too many
We
funds
have
for
a
me to
report.
count.
Yeah, I don't
So-
think they were presenting tonight.
But he's
Oh.
gonna present the 100 division of the Economic Development Fund. and I'm sorry I don't have it before me, but the 200 division used to be for the Nancola Center specifically. However, the only thing that we are requesting, because we're trying to use up the fund balance in there to finish the Nancola Center, this is where all the furniture was purchased, all the moving expenses, is the $70,000 to equip the gym equipment. So I apologize, I do not have that report in front of you guys today. I'll make sure to have it for you guys to add to your books, but,
Yeah, 'cause I definitely want some input on what we're doing with the gym, for sure.
so.
Performance evaluation.
Raylene, just one question. So a lot of these increased costs is for maintenance on City Hall and et cetera. Is it just because of the square footage of the building is a lot more than what we came out of?
Yeah, so there wasn't, with the old City Hall, we did kind of budgeted for the roof, but there was like minimum maintenance because we were very stacked pack but it's been well maintained. And here, things are still well maintained, but they break easily. I mean, we just had a flood in the 3rd floor that we have to repair. Like, those things are gonna happen that unexpected. And so that's what we try to budget for. We have pigeons that we have to deal with. There's been this consistent repair and maintenance out of the 200 division of the 28 fund that you guys just haven't seen necessarily, probably budget, but it's not been in the general fund. So now we're moving it to the general fund to have that oversight.
Okay, thank you.
So if there's no other questions on City Hall, I'm gonna talk about the capital fund.
Very expensive.
The capital fund, once I find it, can be used for
I know.
quite a few different departments.
Is there a tab?
Where we at? Where are we going?
I just have to find it.
Back.
Oh, yeah, just before police, the last one.
It is. Take the last page of
Just
general
before
fund.
police?
Yeah, you see your police tab?
It's under, general fund. And it's almost at the very, very back.
Very last page of general fund, if you're looking for it.
Way in the back?
The very last page of general fund underneath the tab.
I took a while to find it too. If you go to police, but then look the silver one page.
Oh, okay.
So the capital fund is so many departments can use it, and it's not just specific to one department. And so it receives property taxes as well as just a little bit of sales tax. And it has accumulated a fund balance in there. And sometimes that fund balance goes up, sometimes it goes down, just depending on what's requested. So in the amounts that are requested, you can see these are the projects that are budgeted in there with the detailed amount. So there's a $200,000 for professional services for citywide strategic plan, $25,000 for public art, $50,000 for fiber, $6,000 for an IT switch, $50,000 for a startup of pool costs, $36,200 for airport equipment, which is including like weed trimmers and to help with the weeds out there. $12,000 for the city match on the Wolffield Simplot Stadium lease, which that's the transfer out that you see. $190,000 for park machinery. That's going to be a large lawnmower. And then $450,000 for upgrades to the 602 Cleveland parking lot. And then the big one I want to highlight is the $500,000 for the playground equipment at Memorial and Louis Park. And Julie can probably expand on these, but each of these has a lot of detail written into them of what they're requested, especially if they're over that $50,000. But that one came with a lot of background with it, letters from city residents and about the complaints that we've had about those two playground equipment. So that's what's in this request. They're all one-time projects. That's what we've tried to trend for in this request. So
And some of those too, like the playground equipment, are safety related. You know, a lot of the playground equipment there's been there for decades and decades. So it's got the old metal slides, so, you know, kids burning themselves in the summertime, some broken swings, things like that. So that's a big push on that too, is just the safety for people to go to use it. And then obviously it's kids that are using it, so we want to be leery of that. So that's a big part of that one too. Just want to make sure I highlight that.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Raylan, help me understand why we're budgeting this in capital and not in parks.
So Parks is really a maintenance and operations fund. They don't have the capital projects. That's kind of how it is. Same with, my budgeting philosophy is we kind of want to designate what's maintenance operation, what's capital, and try to move the capital if we can to the capital funds to make sure we're setting enough aside for capital projects. But this fund was created, it's been there, and so it is for any department to use. However, this would not be a fund that I would use for an enterprise like water project or water capital. It would be specific to the general or to special revenue funds.
And then also just kind of touch on that, for example, with the improvements at those two parks, you can't use impact fees. You know, impact fee had to be from growth, and so you couldn't use that money there.
Yeah.
It has to be like a new park, so.
We looked at, you know, if there was stuff that I could put in impact fund, I did. Like, you'll see those requests, and I really worked with the departments that whatever is on the CIP, that we make sure that we're doing those projects so that we can use the impact fees down and not let that balance build up.
Just one. Oh, go ahead. Then
I'm
I'll-
sorry, so park machinery, that should be part of ongoing planning, budgeting, maintenance, no?
Yeah, and so like last year, they had several that was replacement, but these are two big ones. One that we are able to budget and impact, and then the other one is going to be in capital.
Just, can you give us some ideas on what the 50,000 startup for the pool? We're gonna get some questions on that since we're building a new pool. What would we need another 50,000 to start it up? Someone's gotta flip a switch?
So the 50,000 startup, that's gonna be like table and chairs. That's what that's gonna be.
Okay.
So, yeah. That's gonna be all the equipment, the lifeguard
Sure, the
ladders.
audience is aware too that, the pool's a big one, so I just
Yeah.
wanted to get that out there on
Yeah.
the,
And I
on the
mean,
record what that was for.
to start up a pool too, chemical wise, it's gonna be several $1,000s to get the chlorine, cause I know even just for my above ground pool at home, it cost me several $100s just for a small pool. And when you're talking commercial, you know, your chemical, I used to service pools when I was in college as well. So the startup cost on just the chemicals alone is probably $5,000 to $10,000, I bet, just to get it to that level.
No,
Yep.
it was
Mhm.
4.
Yeah, that's all good.
So, Raylyn, my vision of capital is a fixed object, like pool chairs, et cetera. So I'm struggling with $200,000 for strategic plan. I don't call that capital.
That one was a tough one, and I can definitely remove that and take it out of the capital fund. I mean, and this one is one, so this is kind of came from my request table, say. So part of what will help definitely guide spending is a strategic plan. Guide spending with priorities and how we want to build it. It's right in line with the comprehensive plan, but it sets strategic goals for the city on how we want to spend our funds, and what the priorities are.
Do we not
And
have
so
one?
We do
Even an
not
old
have one
We've never
right
had a
now.
strategic plan?
No, and so that's why I recommended this. I'd be happy to, I mean, here's the thing, I can move this to the general fund. I moved it out of the general fund into the capital fund. Based on the ordinance, there's certain requirements on the capital fund, and so it can be certain things. So,
Yeah,
I can definitely move it if you don't feel it's the right
based
option.
on what it looks like here, I wouldn't call it a capital fund. I'd call it like a miscellaneous fund or something, because there's a wide variety of different things that
Yeah.
we would be funding here. And I don't know that I would have that in there, but I would love to hear more about your thoughts on a strategic plan at some point in the future.
Yeah. Well, and the way I look at it is like, the hard thing for when I develop a budget and when I kind of look at priorities, it's really like current year priorities, and how do I, like, how I direct the funding on how everyone wants me to. However, it's difficult long-term to make sure that we are equipped for the future in directing the funding if we don't know where we're going. And I can see 2 or 3 years down the road, but long-term, 10 or 15 years, what's the end goal? Like, where do we want to be? That's kind of where.
Yeah, I think it warrants further discussion by all means.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, and another great thing about a strategic plan is it should be specific about what, not only goals that the city wants to accomplish, but it should be very specific to what the law says we are required to provide. So it also helps catch anything that we're providing that we're not required to be providing by law.
So what is the $200,000 for? Is this a consultant? Is this?
It would be a consultant to come in and help.
Need that? Do we have heads around here? Is there leadership around here that could do this without us spending $200,000? Or
you could do it, but
I will say, so I talked to the mayor and I talked to Robin Collins because she is implementing the comprehensive plan and implementing several plans recently. And so to me, working with her, I asked her, I said, what's the best way to go about this? And bringing in a consultant that, one, can interview not only city employees, but the public, because we would want the public to be involved in this and be able to do that outreach for us and dedicate that time. We would want a consultant to be able to do that.
And kind of where it's like a one-time project, so if the city staff are already doing their jobs beyond this of what they're entailed, so you would either, they'd be pulling away from what their duties are, or you'd have to hire basically a temporary employee for a year or a couple temporary employees for a year to do the project. And then, so again, you know, there are companies out there that this is their forte in what they do, interviewing the public, interviewing employees. I mean, it is very in-depth on this. And it was mentioned, I know there was some shock that we don't have one of these. It's never been done. And so it is going to be very in-depth. It's because it's not building on something, it's starting something brand new. So it's going to take a long time to do it, several months, hundreds of hours to go into it. So the staff is already too busy doing their own jobs that they couldn't really pull away. So you either have to hire staff just for that and then let them go when it's done, because it's a one-time project, or go out to a consultant to do it where that's kind of their specialty.
It just occurs to me, we hire a lot of consultants, and I don't know what the number is. Maybe I should ask, but that's one more task for you, to give me the list of all the consultants. And it was several weeks ago, Mr. Mayor, that you mentioned just in passing in a city council meeting that we were going to hire a consultant to evaluate our streets. And I don't know, is Mr. McDonald still here? I think he left. But I have a feeling our city engineer got specific training in that and knows how to evaluate streets. If she doesn't or didn't, maybe we need to reevaluate hiring certain people for certain jobs. We're spending a lot of money on consultants when I think we probably have people within the city that are capable. I would rather give Haley a raise and let her do her job, and it'd be a lot less than $200,000. Sorry to put you on the spot, Haley.
I don't think
Ashley, I'm sorry.
The only thing I would say is, like, giving someone a raise is a long-term commitment, and I totally get where you're coming from. As an appointed official, the only thing I can say is my job is every day. I am in meetings, or I am working to make the city a better place in no way, shape, or form. Is there a spare time that unless I'm on vacation, and even when I'm on vacation, I'm on my phone. It's kind of one of those things, and I'm sure every appointed official that's up here could say the same thing. And so the hard thing is that to make sure that we have the appropriate, because a strategic plan is not just something that I would envision. I would want the public to be a part of it. I would want, just like the comprehensive plan, I would want the community to have their voice in this, because it directs where Caldwell's going for the next 10 or 20 years in budget planning, in how we spend. I mean, I look at other cities and take for Twin Falls. When they do their budget, they have their priorities. So they have certain priorities, and these are like, this is how we budget. This priority is first, and this is the priorities under there, and this is the increases, and this is where the changes are. And so with a strategic plan, instead of just departments and going through step by step, we'd be like, here's this request, and this is where it relates to the strategic plan, and this is why we're doing it, not just because of growth or because we're adding on something. It actually talks about level of service, it talks about where we should be and how we get there.
Can I just add? And it should trickle down from there. Every department should base their strategic plan on the city's strategic plan as well. I'm certainly not saying we should spend 200,000 on this or all of them. I get where you're coming from. Strategic plans, in my opinion, are important, but each department head should also develop one on their own.
Mr. Mayor, first of all, however it is that the council decides to move forward with the strategic plan, I think we should probably delineate between a comprehensive plan, which is required by law of all cities, and a strategic plan, which is something that is something we do voluntarily. But Mr. Stoddard pointed out at a joint meeting with the county commissioners here not too long ago that we thought the city was going to stop right here. And we thought that we were going to grow in this way. And absent a strategic plan, we kind of take second seat to a comprehensive plan. And so whether or not we approve it or not, I think it is a good idea for a strategic plan. And I do agree that all departments, individual department plans should coincide completely with what our strategic plan is.
If I may, Raylan, there's a group of city businesses right now that are meeting. I don't know if you know about it or not, but they're kind of looking in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
And they were thinking about bringing Roger Brooks back in to help them out with that. And I think the chamber was involved with that too. So I'm just wondering, Mr. Mayor, whether we ought to get those folks together and see where they're at, because that's kind of what they were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
As far as a strategic plan, not comprehensive, but strategic plan of where we need to go.
Yeah, and that kind of like an update to see where we're at from where we were. I know Roger Brooks is going to be in town next week, I believe, for a different item on that. So I know I am meeting with him and Carrie Smith-Sigmund to kind of review, and they're kind of showing off our town to others now, which is kind of nice. But yeah, so there's been discussion about, and I've talked to Travis Palmer at the chamber about doing basically a refresh and update. Okay, this is where we're at. This is where we thought we'd be. Are we where we thought we were? And if not, how do we get there? And if we are, what's the next step to go on to that? So I know that we are looking at that.
And he's a lot cheaper than 200,000. I know.
Yeah, well, this would be a lot.
Yeah, I
different.
understand
So
that,
this
but
would be a lot
he
more
would be
in-depth.
one of the cogs in the wheel that would help us get there.
Yeah, because he's only looking at the downtown.
Yeah, I understand.
That's the entire city.
Yeah.
But yeah, it could be part of that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody grabbing their mic down here that I missed?
Faking you out.
Mike put his up and he said no. Maybe not.
Okay.
Okay, so that's kind of the capital fund and the requests. Comments with this, like I said, the budget is still a work in progress. There's still costs coming in. These numbers are gonna update. The reports will be online. My hope is tomorrow, like that's my plan. And so you'll be able, and it's live, so it'll be live data, and so we'll be able to see those reports and have them.
Good work on that, Raylan. Transparency.
Yeah, trying to. And then, like I said, whatever changes we make, they're gonna be reflected, so, and then the final online budget book, which is different than this as a legislative budget book, which will have the final revenues and final expenditures, which will be approved at the city budget on August 20th. That'll be published by August 1st, so that's kind of where that deadline is. And that is all I have.
That's it?
That's enough.
Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just for the rest of the counselors, I was in a county budget meeting today on another issue, and I know they're a long way from even coming close to getting their deal done, and I just want to remind everybody that a lot of what Raylene has to put together is dependent on the county, and my goodness, they can drag their feet a long way, and I think, Chris, you know about that in our previous tenure, and so, we can do our best, because I know the chairman of that group and everything, so we can maybe give them a call too, but they're noted for dragging their feet on this, so keep that in mind when we talk to Raylene about deadlines, so. Thank you.
Yeah, Counselor, all good?
First of all, you're doing wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Do you have a rough number? We had a brief discussion about, ARPA closing on a lot of stuff this year. Do you have a brief number overall citywide, how much ARPA money we're gonna have to account for that we will not have going forward?
Not at the top of my head. We are working on some progress reports and some certain projects like the generator at the CEC and the remodel of the IT room at the CEC Center. So, and then there's the library kiosk that's currently in progress as well. So and then lastly, the water line project. So between those projects, that's going to take up the majority of the funds, but there's going to be funding left over. It's just how we direct it, and that's going to come. We have to have the money obligated by December 30th of this year. So under contract, we even have to tell them how much our administrative costs are going to be. So we don't always know when we're going to code time, but we have to tell them how much it's going to be.
I was kind of thinking of a different way.
Okay.
How many things, I think you said fire and police are being supplemented with some ARPA money.
Yes.
How many things are we going to have to compensate for when that ends?
So that is the only ongoing project that used one-time funds for an ongoing thing. And so police, it's about $500,000, and for fire, it's about $400,000.
So we're close to $1 million that we've got to find to keep that going.
And it's reflected here, and that is part of why
Everything's marked.
the police and fire budgets have, their positions were removed. I know that it's a goal to assist, I mean, I get it, law enforcement, fire, they need all the help. I hear it, I talk with them. I don't want to reduce their budgets. And I even looked at property tax, for example, the cemetery budget, and I talked to Debbie. We reallocated, and so there wasn't a need to increase that percentage on the cemetery, so we held it flat. And I was able to reallocate that increase that would have come to police and fire. So I've done that as much as I can to reallocate as much as I can right now to police and fire to increase the revenue on property tax to help offset that.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for Raylene? Okay, so I think we're into human resources. then,
Resources.
correct?
I thought that was it.
For her. For now, so yeah, don't get too
It said
excited.
thank you.
So,
Was that in, I'm looking, I gotta go back to the legend to see where it's at, Chuck. Thank you. Gotta be here somewhere, right there, it's in general fund. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's keep flipping, there it is.
Okay, mine should be short and sweet, I think. So.
Glass half full.
So I'm just going to be working from our budget book that we put together. On page 2, it talks about what Human Resources mission is. And I've been here about a year and a half now and feel like I have a really great team and we're working together. We're a very busy office. We have a lot of things that we are involved in, right? And so our mission is to be a competent, accessible resource to employees and leaders to support proactive recruitment and retention of the workforce necessary to carry out the city's mission. So there's a lot of things that fall under that umbrella for sure. It gives our org chart. We're an office of 4. Currently, all our positions are filled. And again, I can't say enough good things about the HR team. Very busy and keep all of the day-to-day things going. Plus, we're hit with complaints and comments and questions and all kinds of things come our way. So that's what that next section is, the areas of HR responsibility and support. We find ourselves involved in a lot of things. One of the big things that HR does is risk management for the employer. So we look at things and make recommendations. We make very few decisions, if you will. Department directors make decisions about their departments. The mayor makes decisions about the city. City council makes decisions. So we do a lot of recommendations, support. We do a lot of training. I'll get into the goals and accomplishments here in a minute, but a lot of things fall under that umbrella of human resources. Again, risk management, compliance. We do have the opportunity to really impact employee culture, employee happiness, employee engagement, and we try to do that whenever we can. We help managers get the right people in the right positions and coach them and address performance concerns in the spirit of meeting the city's mission. So on page 3, we worked with my team. We put together a list of the things that we have been our goals and accomplishments. We coordinated the classification and compensation project, which was a very big undertaking, as you know. It included the creation of a new pay schedule that you all approved in December. We also looked at a number of new job families. So as Gallagher helped us with this, they said, the city really needs to dig in and figure out levels of jobs and job families and progression. And so we created the Road Techs 1, 2, and 3. As part of that, we created Parks Maintenance Specialists 1, 2, and 3. We've looked at all the foremen, all the CDL drivers. We looked at the CPD records techs. All of those positions were looked at under the umbrella of the class and compensation project, because we feel like the city hasn't kind of moved people out on that pay range where they need to be. They've budgeted at the very minimum of the minimum, and so we have tried to work on getting those, the pay right, the job families right, and so that has been an ongoing process. We've instituted pre-employment physicals for jobs that have physically demanding duties. The city was not requiring physicals before, which I think is an area of risk if we're not evaluating, if people can physically do the job that they need to. Police and fire do a great job of that. They have a lot of things in place that the other departments don't. So we have instituted those pre-employment physicals through West Valley as part of that pre-employment activities before people are hired. We've updated and developed policies that have all come before you over the last year and a half. The on-call policy was a big need. The volunteer PTO sellback, paid parental leave. I have to say, since we instituted paid parental leave on January 1st, we've had like 15 dads, 0 moms, 15 dads take advantage of paid parental leave. So I think employees are really thankful that you guys approved the paid parental leave. We did the compensation philosophy, again, trying to figure out. Chief Ingram came to me and said, how do I move my people out? How do people get to maximum of the pay grade? And it's like, well, it's not within the budget. The city hasn't budgeted the flexibility to be able to give those kind of raises and reward performance, right, through bonuses or merit increases. They've been at the minimum of the minimum, so we don't have a lot of wiggle room to move people out. And there really needs to be a way to do that. And like Raylyn talked about, we're looking at people who worked for the city 7 years or more, just trying to get them to midpoint. So midpoint is the market, 50% of market, 50% percentile of market. We have a lot of people that have been here 7 years that aren't even at that market, that midpoint, and then people farther out on that. So we've been looking at all of that. Use of city vehicles, we wrote that policy and implemented it. We began implementing NeoGov recruitment efforts. We've been doing the Hire to Retire training. So Hire to Retire Class 1, 2, and 3 is all about recruitment and onboarding. It goes from vacancy all the way up to filling that position and how you train that person. I really feel like city supervisors, they just haven't had training. And so we're kind of starting from square one with a lot of these things and kind of building up a foundation. So we've onboarded probably about half of the departments now. So NeoGov is that online application system where we don't get the paper applications. They apply online, supervisors can review them, and we keep all of those. So we're about halfway done with that. Doing more job fairs and those kind of things. Again, created and conducted the Hire to Retire supervisor trainings. We've coordinated 2 USERRA trainings, the military requirements under the law. I think there were a lot of supervisors that didn't know even what that meant. So we've brought in some experts to do that training, worked with ICRIMP on doing respectful workplace training. We've coordinated budget workshops, benefit workshops and webinars like on Percy and the 457 and Wellness 360 and our employee assistance program. We piloted the project on performance evaluations, which we talked about earlier, right? So you know the status of that. The Hire to Retire class, number 4, so 1 through 3 is about filling a position, 4 is about performance management, and so that's the class that I did. For that, we created and trained on new accident report forms when an employee is injured or there's property damage. What forms do people use? And we created a green envelope. They're now in all the city vehicles. We've trained most of the city employees so that they have kind of a one-stop shop, whether there's like an accident with or without injury, property damage. Debbie and I worked together to create a one-size-fits-all form and process. So it wasn't like, what form, what do I do, where do I send it? So we've done that. My staff's conducted employee benefit highlight sessions. Juanita revamped the new hire orientation. So it was just about signing papers. And it needed to be more depth and breadth of, like we talk about policies and benefits and everything a new employee needs, right, on day one. So they started doing that when we moved to the new building on May 13th is when they started using that new and improved new hire orientation. We also provide notary services, and my staff does a lot of bilingual translation for employees and customers. So that's our list of accomplishments. A little bit about workforce data, just to give you an idea. The current number of full-time city employees is 406. The current number of full-time vacancies this says 34. As of today, when I did it, because this was printed last week, right? I printed it today. There's 36 current vacancies. There's 29 in recruitment. So recruitment is anywhere from job posting all the way up through job offer. There's 3 that are filled by temp agencies or contractors. And then there's 4 that are currently not in recruitment. So we're constantly trying to be filling these positions. I don't know if you guys have any questions about current staff or vacancies.
I did have one quick question. It says that we hired 129 employees in 2023.
Yes.
Is that new employees, or is that just replacing employees that have left, or both?
Both.
Both.
It's both. Yeah, we didn't really track separately. It's just all the new hires, right? So, yeah, we've been in constant hiring mode really since I've been here. I would say that the highest number of vacancies by department, the highest number, streets has 7, fire has 8, CPD has 6. Currently, everybody's less than that, but a total of about 36 that are vacant currently. It's a moving target. Ask Matt. It's a moving target. So the average wage for full-time employees is $30.65 an hour. The lowest wage paid by the city for full-time work is $15.90 an hour, and that's a position at the library. The average longevity of full-time city employees is 5.83 years, so a fairly new workforce. Yes.
Excuse me. There we go. What was your calculations on the average, of the, pay scale? Was it a weighted average? In other words, you have 10 employees at $30 an hour, 5 at $20 an hour. How was that figured?
We just took all wages and did an average.
Okay, 'cause
Yeah, so it's not weighted.
I really think we ought to do it on a weighted average, 'cause this, you know, it balloons what we actually should be at, so,
Yeah,
You understand what
definitely
I'm saying?
can. Yep.
okay.
It's not accurate.
No,
It's skewed by high-pay administrators.
yeah. So if we could correct that, that would be great.
Yeah, we definitely could figure out what that looks like, 'cause I could even take out certain pay grades or do it weighted. Yep.
Thank you.
That's a good idea. So on page 4, new hires, we hired 129 employees in calendar year 2023. That's about 5 every 2 weeks. So, very busy hiring. Separations and turnovers, I did it by calendar year for 2022, so we had 63 separations, and that was 21% turnover. Calendar year 2023, we had 61 separations, and we had more employees, right? So the percentage goes down. And so it was 15% turnover. And then when you look at the reasons for separation, it has those 2 calendar years together and kind of gives you an idea. The city hasn't tracked why people leave. I had my staff, we got the list, we went back and tried to figure out, had them pull the files. They went back and tried to figure out, but there's 29, I believe there's 29 unknown, because we just didn't know, right? So we need to do a better job of tracking why people are leaving the city, because that helps us recruit better, retain better, that kind of thing. So the highest number of separations was police. They had 31 between CPD records and police, 31. Of those reasons, there were 9 resignations. 9 resignations for family or personal reasons, 6 retirements, 4 went to private sector. The next highest department for turnover was streets with 12, and I mean, they had a couple of retirements, a couple of terminations, and about 4 unknowns, so. All right, so moving on to page 5, employee accidents.
Can I stop you just a minute?
Yes.
I noticed we had 15 retirements citywide, what it says here. Are we keeping up financially with the HRA VIVA benefits when we have that many retirements?
Yes, we have an actuary look at that every 2 years, and so we make sure. But every year we budget $500 per FTE. So whether it's vacant or full, we move that money.
Okay, so we're keeping up with.
Right now, we are. If we do see, if the actuary comes back and says, you need to make an adjustment, we will make that adjustment and bring it forward to you. But right now, the actuary is not telling us to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty, page 5, employee accidents, worker compensation, leave management. This is a big piece of what Mary Kay does. That's why I'm asking for another senior. So the 2 seniors would do the higher level work, which includes the leave management, right? Dealing with all the laws, the ADA, the FMLA, return to work, workers' comp. And so I put in here the table, and I think Debbie sent you a separate email about accidents. So this may look familiar to you, but the $1.8 million in claims costs was for those 5 years, 2019 through 2023. State Insurance Fund looks at multiple years to determine what our premium is that we pay. So the lower our claim costs are, the less our premium is that we pay to State Insurance Fund. So, and you can see, again, police and fire are, I think, over 90% of the accidents and the cost of accidents. Not unusual, right? Because very dangerous work, and they work 24/7. There's a lot of them. So there's a higher percentage in that. That being said, I do think that safety emergency manager could help all departments working on safety processes and bring this number of claims down. So you have less people injured and less ongoing. You know, if somebody has to have a shoulder surgery, they may have repercussions for years. So not just the cost of this, but damage to our employees and time loss and those kind of things. So
Right.
there's a cost to that.
And understandably, you hit it dead on. There's a good reason why fire and police have 92% of the accidents, because Brian Kaida hasn't had to body check a felon that's running away from him. I don't know, maybe he
Yeah.
has.
That we don't know.
I'm
that we know
assuming.
of, yeah.
I hope not.
And so it would be understandable why a fireman dragging dead weight out of a burning building would hurt his back. And I
Absolutely.
mean that quite literally. But I really believe we've recently allowed fire and police to hire new professionals over their training divisions. And since that is the bulk of the area where these incidents are occurring, I think we'd be better off utilizing those resources that we're already paying for and tasking them with doing the training and the implementing of the new procedures that would minimize these, rather than adding another body to that. And I go back to it. Maybe we hired the wrong people in those positions, but we should task them with that first, rather than just adding another body because fire and police have all these accidents. So I'm still against that position because of the nature of this job. There, even with all the training, a fireman's going to turn his ankle jumping off of a fire truck to drag a hose while there's a burning building and people inside. I get it.
Right.
Police officers are going to be touching drugs that are going to cause them to be sick and cause them to be disabled. These things are going to happen no matter what. But I would still say that those people we've already hired should be adequate to handle this in their own jurisdictions.
Are you talking about the senior HR position that I'm proposing, or the safety one that I talked about?
The safety one for sure.
Oh, okay. And there would be a lot of other things that position would do, but could be very helpful. Oh, yeah.
I was just gonna say, the safety position is fee-based, so it's not coming out of the general fund, it's coming out of the building department, as a fee, like, it's part of that fee-based department. So I just wanna mention that.
It's still taxes being spent. And we still are already paying people that should be able to do those jobs.
So it's not taxes, because taxes is mandatory type thing. It's a fee based off of a service received. I get what you're saying, but it's not obligatory that people pay for a permit, unless they're doing that service.
I don't mean to argue with you. We're not spending your money or my money. We're spending the public's money.
I get it.
So I did include a table in there about fire and police leave management. It is broader than workers' comp. Again, this is most of Mary Kay's time, so I am asking for an additional senior level HR specialist to specifically deal with fire and police leave. To show care and concern for these employees, it involves meeting with them, filling out forms, walking them through the process. We have a number of employees that this involves, and so you can see the breakdown, right? It's FMLA, it's paid parental leave, it's military leave, ADA accommodations when they have work restrictions, and that kind of thing. So we estimate that about 1,300 hours per year, which is 62% of one position, is just for those employees in fire and police. So we would have that senior level person do that, and that would free up Mary Kay to write policies and get those done on Lexapol, to help with the hire to retire and getting the NeoGov and job descriptions and those kind of things accomplished.
Okay, Shelley, excuse me, just to dovetail off of what Counselor Williams said, have we made any comparisons with our city versus other ones on these type of costs on accidents? Have we done that?
We just had our risk management consultant come talk to us, the executive leadership team, and, he also covers other cities and counties. I think he felt like our accidents, were pretty typical for other cities, but I don't know exact
I know
cost
there's a
and
lot of variables in
comparison.
that, but I'm just curious whether we did any of that research.
Yeah, we certainly could dig in and do more and look at that. It could be a whole project, right, to look in and analyze, why accidents happen and, the causes and that kind of
I think
thing.
the
Chief,
chief
you-
got
yeah.
something to say.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilor Stoddard. Actually, I met with ICRIMP, about 2 months ago, and this Caldwell Police Department is one of the the bottom 1% for claims in the entire state of Idaho,
No?
according to ICRIMP.
Did we do
Since I
that for
took
the
over.
fire department too then, do you know, or not?
I don't know about the fire department.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just
Yeah.
to comment on HR, just doing some quick searches. Most of the data is coming up, says one HR person per 100 to 150 people.
Right.
We're at 440 with 4 people, so that's right on the mark, it looks like, at 2.93, so.
Yeah, so when I figured it, I figured, 1 to 111 right now. If you add in the, did you add in the vacancies? Yeah.
I think I did.
440, yep,
440.
yep. So I got 1 to 111, and then with 5, I got 1 to 88.
Right.
1 to
That's what I'm
88.
saying, which
Yeah.
is well below the national average, which is 1 per 100 to
Sure.
150
Sure.
employees.
Yeah. I'm just preparing for the future because as the city grows, I don't know what positions, if any, will be added this year, but that adds on to the 440. So, yep. But we're right in there. But we're fine. I mean, if we don't get a senior HR for this year, we will continue to do the good job that we've been doing and get everything done. It just becomes challenging because it ebbs and flows. We don't know when. For example, I've had a couple of employee issues that have escalated where we've had to do some quasi-mediations. Those are things where you don't expect that you have to come in and have conversations and help, with problem solving and those kind of things. So those things happen all the time and take us away from counting performance evaluations and, these kind of things. So, all right, so employee benefits, open enrollment we did. We held a lot of employee sessions, which I think is unusual for the city. I don't think they've been doing that in the past. We processed all the changes. We did a biometric screening, coordinated that. We processed a lot of bills. And I don't think I even realized when I got here, and it's about 12 per week, which I guess doesn't seem like a lot, but we have a lot of bills. We process Regents bills and Delta Dental and EAP and Ally Health and, just all of those different bills. It's constantly I'm signing bills every day, for that, which is kind of unusual. I haven't worked in an HR office that has done that. We process per-seat transmittals, assist employees and beneficiaries with benefits and paperwork, when things happen, right? And then we also coordinated an employee benefits fair in April 2024. Our goals for this next year, we're in the process of working with Lexipol to move all of our employee handbook onto Lexipol so employees can read it on their phones, acknowledge policies as new employees, and acknowledge revised policies instead of doing it through email. We have plans to draft a tuition reimbursement program. As Raylene talked about, we're going to coordinate bilingual Spanish-speaking assessments and premium pay. So that's in the works. Juanita did a lot of research to figure out what company and what process to use. We want to coordinate intern summer help programs, and we've increased the personnel budget to $36,000 to hire interns. And then there's a table there, or a org chart for the HR positions. Shows the new HR position that's going to do police and fire leave management, and then reclassing the HR generalist to more of an office manager, which is really what she's doing. She's supervising that other HR generalist and basically running the office. If it wasn't, the city is in big trouble if Juanita leaves, because she manages so many things for the city that I just don't even have to worry about. And so that is a reclass of that position. So we're recommending that. And then the very last page is just the rest of the operating budget for HR. Again, it adds in the bilingual Spanish-speaking assessments, so that's the increase, part of the increase in the professional services. We've been doing the Affordable Care Act, the 1095 tax forms that get done. That was getting paid out of a different fund, being moved into HR, so that's part of that increase. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, Councilor Williams.
Mr. Mayor, and I'm gonna continue to ring the bell. I can't see my way through any new positions this year. You knew I would say that, but I have to be consistent. We've increased so dramatically that to take a year off and breathe with, some of the information that even Raylene shared with us a moment ago, where we were talking about, sales tax being off and, we're still waiting for numbers from the county. I just don't see it as responsible government continuing to grow at this rate, even though the mayor would, argue that if we don't do it gradually, we'll end up doing it, in clumps. We did a pretty big clump last year. It was dramatic. It was a huge increase, and if I have to ultimately vote no on the budget in principle, I will, but I'm going to be a no vote on these new positions.
Mr. Mayor.
Understood.
Yeah, same as my research that I just did here, while we're up here. I'm not saying that all the important points that you pointed out are great. However, according to the data I can pull up, we have enough people in HR.
Councilor Dittenberg?
Mr. Mayor, do I just get one question?
It depends how long it is, maybe.
All right.
No, you can have as many as you want.
So I guess the comment that I
I've got
make
people
is,
left, so we can keep
all
going.
right, we still have, so, I'm looking at the number on, page number 3, that shows that we have 240 positions at the city, and we hired 129 of those positions. Even though the turnover amounts reflect a short number, we have 30% of our employees probably inexperienced, ill-equipped, not performing up to where we would want them to as a tenured employee. So I think the turnover rate is a little misleading. The second thing I want to know is, have we put anything together with regards to the cost of turnover to our city? Using a filter from my past, a long past, almost 25 years ago, when I worked for the Boise Police Department, we knew that it cost 1.5 times the first year for a new officer as it did for a senior tenured officer. And so the argument was there is we should probably pay our law enforcement so they don't leave. So when we're talking about taxpayer dollars, we're talking about which shell we put the dollars and the ticky mark. We don't have dollars, we have ticky marks now, where we put our ticky marks. And I look at the suggestion that maybe we hire another person specifically for police and fire management and for leave management or police and fire, human resource management. And maybe if there is a need for additional human resource management, those positions go to the departments. Anyway, I just think we need to be looking at turnover, what the cost of turnover is to the city, and do you have any numbers have you looked into what the cost of turnover does to our city, to our budget?
No, I don't have that information. The city wasn't even tracking why people were leaving. So we've got a lot of work to do, to get that information together. NeoGov will track that. So NeoGov is the online application system, and you can even be able to see how many days it takes to fill a position. But we've got to get all the departments and all the positions on that system before we're able to pull out those numbers. So it's a work in progress. I've been here about 18 months. I think we've got quite a lot done. And so lots more to do, definitely, lots more to do.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? So real quick before Shirley does step down, I just want to tell her how much I do appreciate her. I tell her when we meet, but in public it's nice to do that as well. So outside of police and fire, which obviously we've had some great changes there in our emergency or our emergency services offices. Looking at the, say, two other departments in the city, I think finance and human resources has been some huge changes in being able to bring in the different, with Ray Lynn coming in and kind of separating that out with Rochelle, and then also in human resources, the number of changes have been just phenomenal. You mentioned a couple of them right there with, the NeoGov and the OpenGov. Is that the other one?
OpenGov and NeoGov.
On that. So just,
Right.
it's been remarkable. And just this last week alone, both, and they're not here, so I can call them out. Robin, in my discussions with them, had just nothing but great things to say about HR and how they're working with their employees and all that. So I just want to, how much it's appreciated.
Thank you. I do
So,
appreciate it.
Okay, are you doing, is that back to you for employee health funds?
No, well, I kind of went over that in my proposal, so that one's,
Snuck it in, I didn't even notice.
it's one of
so.
those things that, you'll see that in the final budget book. It's based off of what we actually propose in the benefits, for the employee health funds. We don't over budget that, it is what we actually spend, so based off employee. So it's over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. So, couple of options. I know some people are excited to maybe leave a little early.
Where's leaving?
So, and then there are things, like I said, we want to bring back for sure in regards to detailed lists on, especially the community relations projects for the mayor, the mayor's office, and the city council. So one of two things, I could either go over everything and leave those two out, or leave those out and we could go over those next time, or we could just go over all of it at the next meeting. Is there a preference?
Over at the next meeting, I'd like to see something in front of me.
So go all of it at the next meeting, or just those, push it off to the next meeting, or do you want to go over most of it now and the second part next time? Any preference?
For me, I think it would be better if we did it all together so that
Okay.
we had all at one time.
Okay, very good. Then we will do that. So that, again, that'll be specifically, especially the community, and if there's others, but that community relations, and that's basically gonna be specifically in the mayors and the city council, so we can see all of the, details on that, and then get feedback on those individually in that regard. So I guess we'll wait and we'll just kick that one off, and I'll try to be quick through it. On it. I was gonna give Councilor Williams one more chance to say about no more positions with the one that I am proposing, but I'm sure there'll be plenty more chances. I know what the answer is, so, but there'll be many more chances for that, so. Or come up with something really great, so, to say on it.
I do have one question, it's
yeah.
more about, would you prefer I email you any of the updated reports, or would you prefer it printed out to you and just provided at next workshop?
Email or printout,
Email's fine with me.
Email work,
Okay,
okay, email.
so
sounds
I'll
good.
make corrections and then just send it out.
Would those be like this and replace what's in the book as you're going and moving
Those
along
will
through the
be
months?
online, so those, but
Okay.
reports I wasn't talking about, like the employee list and adding the fund and what the funding source is on that one. Just adding additional details on that and then resending it, the community relationship or community relations, detail, emailing that out to you. So instead of just printing it out, it's up to you guys.
Okay, email sounds good.
So I just had one
Yeah,
comment.
go ahead.
Raylene, don't run away, please.
So,
So, have we, it seems like if you move or breathe anymore, everybody has to be issued a cell phone. And it looks like, just looking in this budget, we're paying $50 a month for all of these cell phones.
It's about $50 a month, yes.
That seems like an outrageous number to me. Are we have anybody researching a contract, we might reduce that some?
Right now, we're through AT&T. I mean, I've talked to Jose about changing the contract. He said that we changed AT&T just right before I started. And so, but I can definitely have Anita look at the state contract, see if we can reduce some of those costs and see.
Many of these cell phones are used 8 hours a day during business, and then they just get turned off.
Very much, yeah.
And so, the fact that, I was just looking at Shelley's budget, she's got $2,400 for the year for 4 in-office people to have cell phones. Well, and that's just a small number compared to the number of cell phones we buy for this city that, you and me, we talk on our cell phones probably 16 hours a day, easy. Yeah, exactly, but if we're paying for $50 a month for a cell phone that just gets used.
It isn't
for
used.
business-
I think she can check usage. Isn't that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it just gets used
Yeah, and
8
if
hours a day.
someone's not
and-
using it,
And it just seems like we might do something different there.
Yeah, I can talk to Jose and I think he can definitely come next time as well. But the other thing with city cell phones I know is Duo, which we've talked about, like, that second, that two-factor authentication that we use. And so a lot of times they require it to go on a city cell phone instead of a personal cell phone. And so I think that's an IT internal policy. But-
Yeah, and it's very important, and I agree, we need to look and get the best costs, and also knowing it's very important that we provide cell phones for our employees that need that, because we cannot have them putting Duo or their city email on their personal phones. It needs to be separate. And in our world today, anything you do on your personal cell phone, if it's city related, now that phone can be public records requests to come in, and so there has to be that separation, and offering that for our employees to do that. And so I know I will not contact them on their personal phone. I always contact them on their business phone, so to keep that separation.
also on that, just make sure, again, based on past experience, that we don't have numbers out there we're paying for when the employee no longer works here either. Sometimes the phone's turned in, but the service isn't turned off.
Right.
on
Yeah,
the phone if somebody's not tracking that.
yeah.
Okay, very good. Anything else before we wrap up for the evening?
Talk about eval systems.
No, let's not.
Not tonight?
My headache's big enough, so we can talk about that next time.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Then that'll end us for this evening, and we're back 1 week from tonight, I believe. Is that correct? Same room at 4 p.m.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be here as well. We have one more week here and then we'll be at the new city hall.
Yeah, we thought we were done with this.